There's one here. Leave, are you looking for it? Right here. Right here. Thank you.
Okay, folks, we'll get underway. Everybody's all settled in and working their way in here. Hopefully you can hear me in the back annex space. I'll project as best I can. I'm Parker Reilly, actually with the District 4 Commission. That means Chittenden County, so my apologies in advance. Please be kind to me. I'm on loan here in District 5. What I will concede, of course, District 5 does have the best scheme in the state, so I'm very biased to this commission as it is. With me are Commissioners Francine Perkins and David Susi, our coordinator Susan Baird, and our state coordinator Aaron Brondike. Thank God he's got the AV covered as best we think we do. We have, and of course, the reason I am here is because there are so many conflicts of interest with some of the leadership of District 5 who are unable to chair this hearing. But for my part, and I know for fellow commissioners Perkins and Susi, we have all reviewed the parties, the filings, the adjoiners, everybody involved, and none of us have any conflicts of interest to be concerned about. So we just need to explain that up front, per the law. Also, per the open meeting law, as you've seen, we are now in the world of hybrid meetings, I guess one of the post-COVID revolutions. So we're not only in person, which is a pretty healthy turnout here, of course, but also by Teams video and telephone participation. Those details have been sent out in advance with a notice, so obviously folks have understood it and they're online either by phone or through Teams. The meeting is being recorded, and so just so you're all aware of that. Now, all those online, usually it's, mute your device when not speaking, but actually what's so nice is that you're all auto muted, whether you want to be or not. But when you do want to speak, Aaron Brondike will release your mic and you'll be able to express yourselves. And of course, and for you online, the old rule, please only log in with one device at a time, otherwise you get crazy warbly feedback. So just to get the why we're here, this is application 5L1614-1, filed by 2322 LaPorte Road LLC for project generally described as a removal of an 8.5 acre rock hill to facilitate the construction of a new industrial park on a 437 acre tract located at 2322 LaPorte Road in Morristown, Vermont, where earlier this morning we had a site visit, easily the most adventurous site visit I've ever been on, because we rode one of those cat track snowmobile ATV hybrid things, and we went pretty far up there to check out the water tank locations, and that was after checking out two views of the rock knoll that will be removed as part of the industrial park build out. And so we got a really good lay of the land. We had several of the parties there. We were able to point out either visibly or physically or on the map where their homes are in relation to the proposed projects. That was very helpful for us. And just continuing on, the existing 8.5 acre rock hill located in the southern section of the tract will be removed over a period of 10 years. The quarried rock will be crushed and screened on-site and either sold or utilized on-site for the construction of a 26-lot industrial park involving buildings, roadways, utilities, wastewater and water systems, and associated site amenities. The project also involves the construction of a new water supply system on a subparcel located west of the industrial park between Cochrane Road and Stagecoach Road. So now just to reiterate the order of the criteria, which we sent out in advance to everybody, just in broad strokes, since the opening front of the discussion will be the blasting and rock removal phase for the grading and construction of the eventual industrial park, we are grouping several of the criteria that really overlap. And so just so everybody knows how we're going to go here, for example, we're going to start essentially with criterion 9E. After the applicant gets a brief overview of the project, we're going to jump into 9E, which really covers all manner of all impacts from rock blasting and removal on surrounding land uses. Then several of you, and we have several subsets of parties, have expressed interest under that particular impact, specifically with aesthetics, and that'd be the noise and impact on your property. Certainly criterion 1 for air, any concern about dust or contaminants by airway. Also criterion 3 being the impact on adjacent and existing water supplies from the blasting practice. We're going to, and we are going to actually start with criterion 8, a little bit out of order because of the applicant's expert witness has limited time availability here. And then as we go through each of the criteria, and we try to keep it a little casual Vermont style, not too much like Matlock or Law and Order, but we do have a process where the applicant puts on their case, and then the parties have an opportunity to ask questions. Then the parties have an opportunity to put on their own case, testimony, what have you, experts, and then the applicants have a chance to cross-examine that testimony. And we repeat the process throughout the criteria as we move along. We do have, since there were so many people involved, we did take the very proper process of having a pretty extensive pre-hearing conference process here. We don't always do that, but it's best in cases this size to keep things organized. And so we had a long pre-hearing conference in order to identify, at least preliminarily, all of you who have potential party status in this project. And just to run down the party status definitions, you have the parties by right, and those are the statutory parties, the applicant, municipalities, various state departments, et cetera. Then those parties by permission, and this is one of the rare ways, and former Senator Susi will appreciate that the legislature doesn't always get it right when it comes to drafting language that makes any sense. But here they did get it right, because the definition is particularized interest. In other words, something that's unique to you, specific to you and your property, and not just something you share with the general public. So a good example is, we're all concerned about stormwater, of course, and what it can do for neighboring waterways and eventually phosphorus into Lake Champlain. That's noble and fine. However, you don't have a particularized interest in that because you share that with everybody else in the room. But if you have a concern about stormwater, washing across your property, filling your basement, well, then you have a very clear-cut particularized interest in stormwater as a potential impact in any kind of project like this. So that's always a good way of explaining how we come down on that. And so we made those preliminary determinations, as you've all seen. Then what we do is, and there's always a catch-22, because I'm always like, well, they can't participate unless they're parties. They can't participate unless they're parties. They can't participate without an interest unless they're parties. But then how do we know what their interest is and what their problems might be without letting them participate as parties? So that's why we do this preliminarily, to give you a chance to explain where that really fits with you. Then at the close of these proceedings, at the end of the day, when we do our final rulings, we will then make a final determination on party status based on how this went and any subsequent filings. Hopefully that's not as clear as mud, and that's maybe not too many questions. But actually, before we move on, are there any questions real quick, just preliminarily, that for what I've covered? Yes.
Are we going to address any of the quarry questions later, or is that all first thing? In other words, if quarry comes into 5, for example, are we going to be able to address that, or are we going to do the whole quarry now?
We're really really going to, as we go through each, yeah, we're really starting with the quarry and blasting, yes, for sure. It's almost like chronological to the project, you know, that sort of is first.
We do all the quarry first and then do all the industrial park after.
Correct, that's right. So, and then with aesthetics, however, since we're lumping aesthetics together with one witness, we are going to go quarry and then water towers and industrial park in general.
Okay.
And then we'll go back and then there are other criteria where it's less about the quarry, more about the ongoing industrial park. So that, yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. All right, so, now before we go any further, anybody who is going to testify, expect to testify, will want to testify or offer any testimony, I need to swear you in, so please raise your right hand. We got them all. Please swear, or will you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be truthful and complete? Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, I can stop talking for a second, hand over to the applicant for a brief overview of the project, keeping in mind that we've all gone through the application. And then, like I said, then we'll jump headlong into the blasting excavation plan, timing, phasing, and all that, with 9E as a backdrop to then be able to pop into aesthetics, et cetera.
Okay, yeah, we're prepared for that, thank you. So I'm Peter Smart from VHB. I'm a civil engineer. I'm here on behalf of the applicant 2322 LaPorte Road LLC. So I was going to give a quick overview of the project, just a couple of minutes. I know a lot of us are familiar with it, but just to sort of set the table here for folks in the room to understand big picture, and then we're ready to jump into the criteria. We know we have a lot to cover. With me, I have Jim Mahoney, who's general counsel for the applicant. We also have members of the team that will provide technical testimony on certain criteria. And we also have Chris Roy and Emily Garrett from Downs Rackland as counsel here as well. So I'm just going to do a quick orientation of the project, say a few words, and then I think we'll be ready to go in the first criteria. The only screen I have to project is this guy here. I don't know if folks can see that or not. No, the audience may not be able to see it all. I was thinking as I was sitting here, I do have a board here, maybe just to get it started. I'll grab my board. It might just help for the opening statements here. So it's still make sure small people back, but this is something. So this is an overall view of the project parcel. Is this working for folks online and you step on here? Okay. So project itself involves land associated with a 437-acre parcel of land that's located along Route 100 and near the Stowe Marshall Airport. So if you look at this map, this north is to the right. You see Route 100 passes more or less through the map from left to right, and the airport is on the east side of Route 100, with our project to the west of the airport, right across from the airport. So 437-acre total. There are 3 subparcels associated with that larger parcel, and this application seeks permit coverage for construction of a project on 2 of the 3. Probably the primary focus is this 89-acre industrial park parcel, as we've been referring to it. This is an area that's zoned industrial under the town's current bylaw. So that's where you can see the industrial lots, the industrial infrastructure. There's also a magenta outline here for the limits of the temporary rock extraction area that is part of the project. Moving to the west, there's a larger parcel that lies between Cochrane Road and Stagecoach Road, and that parcel features the water infrastructure. So there's a short gravel access drive to the water tanks, which are closer to Stagecoach Road, more toward the top of the page. And then toward off of Cochrane Road, there's a gravel drive that takes that provides access to the well and treatment building, water treatment building. So those are the overall project components. Before getting into the criteria, I think I wanted to just say a few words about the project. And you know, the team's been working on this project for 5 years. This has been a long road for us, and I wanted to go into some of the sort of thought that has gone into this project and planning it as comprehensively as we can. We know it's a big project, but you know, stepping back, there's such a shortage of industrial land in the area and in the county. When you look at the Lamoille County Regional Plan, this site is mentioned specifically in that plan as one of the areas that are most suitable for industrial development. There's certain lack of shovel-ready projects. There are several areas listed. Many of them are in Morristown. This, one of them specifically listed. And I think the plan is really insightful because it describes industrial land and some of the challenges with bringing that land to the point where it could be shovel-ready and ready for projects. And I think the insight comes from the plan describes that many of the sites have attributes that are appropriate for industrial development. In this case, on this site, proximity to the airport and some of those existing commercial and industrial uses. Industrial land is a very compatible use for the airport. I think those of you who know some of the history with Burlington is some of the residential use that's grown up around the airport has started to create conflict. So it's a very compatible use with the airport use. But what the regional plan goes into is this description of a lot of these sites, even though they have some of these favorable aspects, they lack some key hurdles that are needed to bring a project to the construction phase and to be used for this industrial use. And this project has the same challenges, and you see it reflected in some of the components that we're going to talk about today. So we know that when we get into the criteria, we're going to sort of break it apart, and we think that makes sense. You know, we can focus on the rock extraction, we can focus on the water tanks, but the whole project itself was designed holistically to overcome some of those hurdles. And those really are the way the project addresses those is through that rock extraction, through this water system. So we're fortunate enough here to have an applicant and an ownership pattern where we can take that water system, we can put a well on sort of across the street on Cochrane Road and put the water storage there as part of the community system. And then that's going to allow us to more orderly and more deliberately be able to develop the 89-acre parcel into industrial lots and completely sort of meet the needs of the regional plan. And so the water tank helps achieve that by achieving more density and highest and best use of that industrial land. The rock extraction does a similar thing. We have a source of on-site material. It provides some efficiency to be able to implement the project. It allows for some of that material to just be used on site without having those truck trips enter the local roads. So, and then also it allows, upon completion of that rock removal, the land would be leveled and be able to be used for future lots, which also helps with some of the financing of infrastructure and its roads and water infrastructure. The site also has fairly good soils for on-site wastewater disposal and management of stormwater via infiltration, which is a great way to manage stormwater, soak it into the ground. So the project has taken the last 5 years thinking about ways to overcome some of those hurdles and be successful in the context of that regional plan. And so when we talk about that today, we just wanted to stress that it's one cohesive project, and these features of the project that we'll be talking about are really important to success for the whole project. So I'll leave it at that as my intro, and then we can dive into the criteria as we're ready.
Great, okay. Yeah, so with that, we will, like I said, we start putting 9E as kind of a back, sort of a springboard to get into the more specific impacts related to the blasting. And so 9E generally covers extraction of earth resources regarding project scope, phasing, and daily operations, whether or not they have an undue adverse effect on surrounding land uses. So that's where we're going to have the applicant then go through the blasting scope, phasing, and daily operations, et cetera, with an eye towards then jump right into 8, because let me just lay this out. Under criteria 9E, we have parties Eisenbaum, Owen, Rockwood, and Town. Now, the 4 of you, however, also more specifically have party status under 8 and 3. So we'll let them go through 9E, and then we'll jump into 8 with their expert. And then you 4 parties, since you're part of this bigger group under 8, you'll have a chance to ask questions under that more specific impact with the aesthetics of the blasting. Then when we're done with that, then we'll go to the water tower aesthetics.
Did you say Robin and Thea Alvin in 9E?
We don't have you there.
We are in the pre-hearing, we're in 9E.
Well, my apologies. I don't know how I overlooked you there. Thank you for that. Yeah. So the 5 of you. Thanks for clearing the record on that.
And Robin and Daisha. Daisha Rockwood.
Yeah, I mentioned that. Yeah. Again, so yeah, with Alvin, Eisenbaum, Owen, Rockwood, Town, you're in under 9E where they're going to start, but hold your fire because your real beef is with 8 and 3. is how it works out. And I mean, this is what you want. Let's say this aesthetics and then impact on what it's going to play. It's just it's really a duplicate. That 90 it duplicates 8 and 3. We don't need to repeat everything again when we cover it under specific impacts that you're concerned about.
I thought it was the other way around. I thought 90 was more catch all for all the others.
Well, it is, but so what I mean is, we'll cover 9E, but then you all get the specific concerns addressed under the sub-criteria, basically, almost like sub-criteria, 8 aesthetics, 3 impact on wells. Because you want to talk about that anyway, but since you would be talking about the under 9E, we'll wait and have you group it together with everybody else under 8 and 3.
So you're saying I can't talk under 90?
We're not saying you can't talk on a 90, you're gonna get all your concerns of what's your impact for aesthetics and impact on your water supply system. You yourself, under those criteria, when we get to 8 and 3. It's all very much combined together, and 1, for that matter, but you're not under air quality, but 1 air quality is also. Look over the that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have you. I had you under 1. Yeah, and air. Yeah, yeah. So let's jump into it.
Okay, you ready for the applicant?
Yeah.
So I'm going to give a general overview of the rock extraction area and general sequence of how it comes online and how it will be operated. And then you'll also hear in more detail from some of our experts, some of which are online under aesthetics and under some of the other criteria that we'll get to. So what I've shared on screen is a plan that really isolates that. So you saw a plan earlier that has the overall final build out, and there's that magenta outline for the rock extraction area. That's now shown on this screen as a shaded magenta area and labeled. Now, this all would not be opened up at one time. This is about an 8.5, 9 acre area that would be used for rock extraction over the course of the 10-year project. This is not a permanent quarry per se, but more rock extraction that's incidental to the project. So the way the applicant proposes to do this is at the same time project construction would start on the industrial park parcel, they'd be going in, they'd be putting in the access road, they'd be working on the water tanks, and then at the same time using some of that on-site aggregate to build the roads. And so the way this would start is from the project entrance, you'd come off of Route 100 and they would enter in and start to build that permanent main road into the industrial park. And that road would head to the south along the east side of the extraction area, and it would double as a road to use to extract that rock. So the applicant would come in, they'd pass under the overhead power lines, and they'd establish a temporary laydown area near the rock extraction area, as far tucked into the south as they can. And the goal in putting that there was because it's surrounded by trees on several sides. So they'd be able to start to work the south end of that rock feature. They would have some protected wetlands that are to the south that won't be touched. And so those have existing mature vegetation that provides screening. Also, there's an existing tree line along the eastern side of the site at that point that provides some screening. So that felt like a good location to be able to start with that activity. And from there, I'm going to now switch to a plan that shows some phase 1 grading. So I'm really zooming in now on that phase 1 of the knoll. This is the south side of this rock knoll. And so from there, they have this temporary laydown area in, and the idea would be to lay down equipment and material there and then start to blast and pull this rock out. There would be a crusher on site. There would be 3 blast days a year that would happen. It's limited to 3 blast days a year. The hours of operation would be weekdays, blasting limited hours is established in the local permit, and then crushing as well will be limited to weekdays. You can see on this plan, there are some setback lines. There are some lines that are labeled as 2 setbacks. There's a 200-foot setback that's a local setback for blasting, and then there's a 300-foot setback that's a setback to any crushing activity. And those are encompassed in our local approval for the rock crushing. So from that point, that we anticipate this phase would take about 5 years, maybe 7 to do this first phase. And then you can see on the right-hand side, this is our future phase 2 area. So now I'm showing you a map that shows phase two. So phase one is sort of called out with like a dot pattern is reclaimed. So that would be topsoiled and grassed as reclaimed after extraction, after that rock has been removed. And then phase two, we move north sort of into the south side of that knoll. And one of the things that we are doing with phase two is we think that we can operate phase two and keep, if you look at the knoll shape, I know it's not easy for all of you to see, but along the eastern side of the knoll shape, where it runs adjacent to the power lines, there's a steep rise in the land layer that's fully wooded. So the goal will be to leave that wooded sort of ridge there in place as long as we can, because that will help screen the project from Route 100. So as we get into phase two, we can sort of tuck in about where the words phase two are and leave some of that ridge as long as possible. And what that's going to do is it's going to provide for a site that has less visual impact. It also will help to mitigate some of the noise and any potential dust that might happen there. So we've really tried to be thoughtful about this. And that was reflected in our local approval for this approach. You can see we have a class 2 wetland along the west side. That wouldn't be disturbed as part of the project except for a small crossing. So what we're trying to provide is an area that is encompassed by existing vegetation to screen it as best we can while we're working out there. So that's phase two. I did want to note that the phase two access, there'd be a secondary access point that would come around and access that phase two from the west side. This also would coincide with the location of a permanent road. So it's an efficient way for us to come in and minimize our impact as we gain access to that northern side of the knoll. So from there in the finished condition, we have a reclamation plan, which is admittedly a pretty basic plan, but it's essentially the idea is until such time as we may put some remaining industrial uses on here, the area would be reclaimed with some subsoil and loam to sort of reclaim that level land. And then in the eventual condition, the site would be used for the last 3 industrial lots in this location. And that would be consistent with the current zoning bylaw. And then so our ultimate reclamation plan is really ultimately to have this be industrial lots consistent with the rest of the project. Before we get into some folks talking in more specifics, I did want to just note, just switch to a PowerPoint. So just backing up some of the activities I described, there are some underlying state permits that support this activity. So certain state permits provide a framework for environmental protection associated with the rock extraction. So I just listed those here for convenience. These are referenced in our application. All the materials, by the way, that I'm going through are already have been submitted to Act 50 and are all available online. So everything we have here today has already been submitted and available. But just wanted to point out some of the supporting permits associated with rock extraction. TEC multi-sector general permit, that's stormwater runoff from the actual rock extraction surface itself. That's an industrial activity stormwater permit. We have a blasting and groundwater monitoring plan, and that's what we'll get into more under criterion 3, but A&R has reviewed and approved our methods for monitoring groundwater and making sure that there's no contamination that occurs in adjacent wells. And A&R has given us some conditions it likes to see regarding dust control. And so there are standard conditions that would be encompassed into our Act 50 permit. We've documented that we agreed to meet those conditions in our pre-hearing recess order response 2 that we provided. And so we're committing to those conditions. There are also the A&R blasting best management practices. We've agreed to meet those, and those are encompassed in the blasting plan as well. And then just local permit conditions. We have a local approval for the rock extraction component in the industrial subdivision, and those encompass things like hours of operation, the reclamation sequence, trucks, backup alarms, things like that we'll get into as part of the sound testimony. And those local conditions were submitted already with the original application. So I think for an overview, that concludes my overview.
Okay.
We do have Mike Willard available for a second. If you want to jump into that now, what's the questions?
Let's do that, and then we'll get into more specific questions that are relevant.
Okay.
And we get the time frame as well.
Understood. So, Mike, if you're out there, I believe I'm going to share the exhibits and Mike is going to speak to them. So I can get those open here.
Michael Willard.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Willard, I have tried to unmute your mic. Just a minute. Let me see. Maybe I didn't do it right.
Yep, great, perfect.
Great. There you are. Thank you. We can hear you.
Okay, very
Mike,
good, thank you.
Mike, let me know which plan you'd like me to start with here. I have your full set and I have your aesthetics report.
Yeah, good afternoon, Michael Willard with BHB, Director of Land Planning and Landscape Architecture. So for this project, we provided an aesthetics analysis report looking at sort of the rock extraction site as well as sort of overview of the water tanks. And so through that process, we followed the Queechy analysis. And from our perspective, what we were looking at was the nature of the project surroundings, identifying compatibility of the project's design with these surroundings, and looking at suitability of projects, materials and colors that are being used. And then we looked at the project from locations where it can be viewed. And then we did an assessment of sort of potential impacts on open space. And so that's sort of what's within our analysis report for aesthetics. And then through Queechy, there was a determination that there was a potential adverse impact for the phase 2 extraction of the quarrying operation. And so because of that, it triggered the phase 2, step 2 of Queechy, where we went into sort of a further analysis into that. And so we can get into greater detail, so part of our report, we did a field investigation and drove around the site, and we looked at local roads and publicly accessible areas. And this was all done during leaf-off conditions to represent the potential worst-case scenario of visibility. So we didn't have, leaf-on conditions that might sort of alter your views or considerations of what would be visible of the project. And so from there, what we did is we took panoramic views from specific vantage points that we felt the project may or may not be visible from. And then we also use a 35 millimeter camera with a fixed focal length of 50 millimeters, which represents really what the human eye sees, what the perspective is in the landscape. And so that's well documented in our Appendix B, as in boy, of our report of photographic inventory of existing conditions. And then so supporting that, we had project maps that show where our vantage points were taken from around the local roads. And then we have some line of sight cross sections to share as part of that as well. And to provide a little more overview, so the local roads that were identified in the area, once we sort of drove around and took look at where potential views may occur, Cochrane Road was identified, Golf Course Road, LaPorte Road, and then Stagecoach Road. So those are the 4 primary roads that were viewed. Those were the ones that were publicly available. There are private roads in and around the area, but that's not considered publicly available, so we did not go down those roads specifically. So not sure how you want to step forward, provide an overview or further detail about the findings in the report.
I think, Mike, it might be helpful to go through just some of the mitigation that, well, I guess I defer to the board if there are questions.
Yeah, however you feel comfortable having laid out your position on aesthetics, again, just for the blasting for now, and then we'll do the water tank separately.
Yeah.
And then go on with parties, ask questions.
Sure.
I think, Mike, it might be, go ahead, Mike.
Peter, maybe bring up Appendix A as an apple. That's the sort of detailed context map. That'd be the page 2 of that PDF.
Okay.
Should be linkable.
Sorry.
Yep, second page. Nope. Next one up. Next page. Yep. So this context map has orange circles on it with numbers. And so that identifies areas where we took photo documentation from in the field. And so if we sort of start on where viewpoint 1 is, so that's sort of the intersection of Cochrane Road and LaPorte Road or Route 100. And so if you look at 1, 2, and 3, so it was that section of Cochrane Road that was identified as having potential visibility of the project during the phase 2 quarrying operation of the rock extraction, simply because by that point, the buffered screening by retaining that forward part of the project, during that phase 2 rock extraction, that part of the project would become potentially visible from those 3 locations. And so for the landscape mitigation, we have introduced landscaping along that whole edge up there that was identified as potential vantage points. And so the idea would be is that landscape mitigation would be as close to Cochrane Road as possible to have the greatest potential impact for visual buffering and sort of introducing sort of native and Vermont adapted plant material. And it's a mixture of sort of evergreen and deciduous trees. So you'd have mitigation occurring during leaf-off conditions. We've found this on many projects to be an effective measure because it harmonizes with the local landscape and doesn't look foreign and sort of blends in with the surrounding landscape. And so Cochrane Road, that section there where you see 1, 2, and 3, those were really identified as probably the most potentially visible on Cochrane Road. As you move further south, where you see vantage point 4 and 5, what starts to happen is that existing dense vegetation that is sort of west of the rock extraction, all of that is to remain, and there's a landform there. So views are completely buffered by that existing landform and the vegetation itself. So no anticipated views basically south of vantage point 4 to 6 along Cochrane Road. If we keep moving south along Golf Course Road, we did photo documentation, several locations there, basically 6 to 9. And similarly, all of that dense vegetation that is south of the rock extraction site and the landform will mitigate any potential views of the project. And again, those vantage points are depicted in Appendix B as in boy. Moving sort of east of the project on Route 100 or LaPorte Road. So again, vantage points 9 through 12. Similarly, 9 to 10, we identified through that section of LaPorte Road, there'd be no potential visibility. For similar reasons, there's a large, dense existing vegetation and landform that sort of intervenes potential views from those areas. It wasn't until we got to about vantage point 11 where you could start to get glimpses of the project site. And then specifically, again, reinforcing what Peter was saying earlier, the methodology and the phasing of how this project is being considered is that whole forward-facing part of the landform would be retained during the phase 1 extraction. So the potential visibility in phase 1 is very limited because of that. The wooded knoll would essentially buffer itself in the back, and you wouldn't be able to see into the project site. And then so once you got from 11 to 12, thinking about phase 2, once the knoll starts coming down, again, we identified that area certainly would be visible during phase 2 extraction. And to that end, we have identified that landscape mitigation would need to be introduced, again, similarly to Cochrane Road, as close to LaPorte Road and as close to the parcel boundary as possible, to have the greatest, most meaningful impact for visual buffering of the project during that phase 2 operation. Any questions or comments, or we can jump to the photographic inventory if it's helpful, if someone wants to see from a specific vantage point.
It'd be good transition to questions from those folks who are in. I think you covered the good lay of the land for me. All right, so under criterion 8, I'll just call it the parties. We have Alvin, Brown, Clues, Coulier, Cole, Eisenbaum, Jakewish, Nepboom, Nilsson, Owen, Rockwood, Stokes, and Town. I guess if you have a question, for the witness, raise your hand, identify yourself for the record. Ms. Alden.
Is it okay to stand?
Absolutely.
My name is Thea Alvin, and I'm taking an opportunity to organize for your benefit the parties so that we can have cohesive understanding and not chaos in the room.
That is much appreciated. Thank you.
You're welcome. That said, I'm hoping that I'm organized enough to present to you. The change in order is helpful that we organize ourselves under criteria. So it's just a matter of
Gotcha.
shuffling as we go.
Yeah.
We understand that the parties in proximity to the different areas you'd want to hear from first. Is that like, so that the distance to different points would be important to you? So people living closest, for example, to the quarry area would you want to hear from first, and people living farther away, we would hear from later.
Really never really a preference. I mean, you can point people's proximity out on the site map. We saw that on the site visit, but of course now we're on the record.
We do have a site map that we can share with everybody. This replicates the larger map that's over here, and I have copies for everybody. We did it this way so that the parties could point out where they live, so that you all could understand where everybody's at. I'll give you guys. Where you all are.
Parker, just a question. Is this the cross of our folks or their presentation?
Well, I was giving Ms. Alden some leeway on whether she's gonna start with questions or go into more of a presentation. So I was gonna ask you, I mean, do you have specific questions of the expert, or do you want to,
I do have specific
I
questions.
figured you would have questions. I think
Yeah.
we can do how about we do like a hybrid of that? Would that be acceptable? It's often easier for folks who.
No, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
everybody was on the
I
same-
saw it going that way, and
I'm happy to do whatever, because it's all new to
No,
me.
that-
and
no,
whatever.
stick with the presentation.
He's the chair, you do it.
I can see you're gonna have like a presentation and questions, and that's fine. You can just
Yeah.
morph it together, and it's even more efficient.
Okay, super. Could you turn your screen back on? I don't think that's on mountain. So in terms of, asking Mike some questions about, Mike, are you still there? Is this Mike
I am.
on? Good. Okay, hi.
Yes.
So I have a similar copy of the map that's up there. My house is over here for you all to understand where I live. And just by way of brief introduction, I'm a sculptor. I work with stone. I'm in and out of rock quarries all the time professionally. I work all over the world. I have sculptures in installations in all over Europe, China, Mexico, Canada, Iceland. Primarily, my family is from Italy, so I have a lot of connections to Italy. I've been working on restoring a 15th century village in the Alps. I'm very familiar with seismic spots and marble quartz actually is my particular area. With regard to this quarry, I wanted to talk a little bit about what it looks like from the ground, because 8 is about aesthetics and what it looks like for us, what it looks like for us to live there and live near it. At my home, I have built a sculpture park. And as you can see, my property is just to the north on Route 100. So there I have a sculpture park where people such as Oprah Winfrey come to visit and film and do walk and talk with me on the property. I've been in the New York Times, who's been there. Folks spend a lot of time. Actually, I have here, to your point of there it is. This is another aesthetics opportunity. This is the Yankee magazine. This is me in the river of the Ryder Brook River. So, in terms of aesthetics, my property is a sculpture park. It's peaceful, it's calm, it's where people come to relax. There are school groups there all the time. There are people taking photographs, people stop, 2 or 3 people stop every day. So just in terms of context, so you understand where I'm coming from aesthetics wise, my question for Mike is, if the terms of the permit on the local level with regard to the landscape planting, I understood that the landscape planting for the entire project was going to be done in advance of any blasting or construction on site. And I heard you saying that it's only coming in terms of before phase 2. Can you speak to that in terms of meeting the DRB's original permit for this project?
Yes, so I'll let Peter back this up because he attended the local permitting. But where I was speaking from is originally when the project was being conceived, we had developed what would be considered a phase 1 and a phase 2 landscape plan for the project. And so the phase 1 was specific to the quarrying operation for the rock extraction and saying, okay, these are the areas where we should certainly put in landscape mitigation for the phase 1. And then thinking about the industrial park as a whole, phase 2 coming in sort of at a different time. But to your point, I think Peter had shared that it was through local approval, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, that the town was hoping to put in all the landscape mitigation in like right from the start. So that was my understanding.
That's right. The town put a condition in our approval that all the landscaping, we had originally presented it in 2 phases, but the town put a condition that should all happen at once as one of the first phases of the project prior to extraction. So that's what we're going to do.
So his testimony isn't quite accurate. You're going to do it first, not in 7 years, because that's important. It's going to be completely screened first before you do anything.
Correct. The screening material and the plant material will go in first before we do it.
The trees and the planting, the
Yeah.
landscaping.
Yeah, that's a condition of our local permit.
In reading over the recent blast, I'll turn this around so I can see it. The blasting and well monitoring document that was uploaded a couple days ago. With regard to main drilling and blasting. This speaks to phases, so I'm going to keep Mike involved in the conversation here. Main drilling and blasting is talking about the MSI stone quarry. So just to be clear about the use of the word quarry in terms of temporary or incidental to construction, which was a huge debate. The word quarry is on the plan. The word quarry is in our agenda. The word quarry is the name of the road in the industrial park. So I think it is very obvious that we're talking about a quarry. We have a blast plan from a person expert in explosive who is talking about a quarry. In his blast plan, he actually says, which I was really surprised to read, but I was wondering if you guys had caught it, because I thought that was really interesting. He says, in order to reduce the number of blasts and increase efficiency, both phases 1 and 2 will be shot in the same lift. So this is from the main drilling and blasting company. Here's their phase 1, it's the entire thing. Not 1 as in the back and then the front. It's 1 top down. Phase 2 is the leftover, it's a little bit higher. So from main drilling and blasting's perspective in this documentation, they're not talking about the same phase 1 and phase 2 that Mr. Smyer and Mike were talking about. Main drilling and blasting is talking about top down, the whole thing gone. So can you talk about that a little bit, about how the difference in your phases works with regard to drilling and blasting?
I believe what that's referring to is that I don't believe that there are 2 phases that are shown in that plan. I believe the first phase encompasses, actually, if I could just see.
Sure. You can look at the big numbers on the top and then they subtract, and then the numbers that are left over, are the amount of footage that they're taking down in a lift.
Yeah, so I think what we're looking at here is that the area of the sort of ridge that we described that would be provided to keep a sort of forested buffer and mitigate along that eastern side of the rock extraction area. What you're looking at is that ability that we talked about, that I talked about in my testimony about how we think we could get into this area of and start phase two at that location without disturbing that ridge. And that's what this first plan reflects. And then the second plan is essentially the full phase two of removing that ridge and then continuing to make the land level after that. So that's what I see depicted here.
So the numbers are showing that this is done across the board. And that really the high point is the second phase. And that's what the numbers are talking about. The high point comes down in the second phase. But really what we're talking about is clearing all of the trees off, the whole thing, except that little front buffer, and taking the whole thing down top to bottom, right?
That's not the proposed phasing that's encompassed in the Act 50 plans and in the.
It's not, and that's why I think it's interesting. This is the blasting plan that is submitted. So, with 5 years of intense work, I mean, your work is amazing. You put so much into it. I would think that after 5 years, the phases would be worked out. This is the blasting plan. So the blasting plan doesn't line up with your phases, which is a concern to the neighbors.
Arthur, this is getting a lot into argument now. It's not even presentation of evidence or asking a question of a witness,
Would you
but it's,
like that?
please, for a moment. So it is getting to argumentation, which certainly there'll be a time and place for that. But, you know, I don't know that we want to spend the evidentiary hearing time arguing the positions of the parties.
No, I understand. I think Ms. Alvin made her point and kind of more from, questions to presentation to a closing argument.
And it's a highly relevant point.
Yeah, we want to know what it looks like. So this is about the aesthetics. Is it gonna look like is it gonna look like a quarry? Or is it gonna look like a rocky knoll?
Right, understood. Good. So I guess in this phase, just try to keep the questions and presentation.
Okay,
Sometimes you get the answer you got is the best one you can get out of the witness.
so I would like to ask is this an appropriate time to have one of the parties come up? And, then I would ask that party, does that remove me from talking with Mike? Or would I continue to question Mike or would the parties question him? Or Peter? I'm just unsure of what your process is in terms of continuing
Well,
questioning.
part of your presentation, you can bring up, it's being sort of one of your own witnesses, that's fine. Sorry, I'm trying to keep this casual.
Sure, I have TV and movies for my reference point, so, I thought this.
Yeah, no.
So within 8, we have there's a thing called burden of proof, right? So the burden of proof is with the applicant to show how they're going to do this project. And so far we didn't get the landscaping and, don't really have a clear viewpoint of how the blasting is gonna carry out. So, one of the things with regard to, criteria 8 that's super important is noise. Is this a good time to talk about noise?
Absolutely.
Okay. I understand that there are crushers involved and explosive devices. I have worked around quarries a lot. I've heard the blast whistles, mostly in Italy where you're in the Alps and you hear the echo sound of the whistle. So I'm familiar with some of that personally, but what I'd like to know about is, what is it gonna be like to live near this noise? We don't know where the crusher is gonna be located. And it seems like it would be moving. It seems like loaders and things would be moving around. And the sound that we have, the sound study that we have looks like it's from a fixed location. So I'd like to bring up Brooke to talk a little bit about sound and to ask some questions about how those decibels move around within the space. Is that okay? Brooke is one of our parties.
Okay, state your name and your name for the record, and are you an expert in?
Sure.
I'm
Brooke. Gotcha. No worries. So I am, a neighbor of the Morristown Duhamel gravel pit, Brooke Scatcherd, 94 White Birch Road. And I have party status on 10, but I'm, speaking towards this because I have experience in the Act 250 process as a adjacent landowner of the Duhamel gravel pit. And so, as Thea mentioned, the sound study shows sound apparently emanating from a single point. There's two concentric circles modeling the sound on the property. The sound study we have for the Duhamel gravel pit showed very jagged lines as equipment moving around the quarry site. And so my questions are, where on the map the equipment was modeled from, and what type of equipment was used in the modeling. It shows a list of all the various pieces of equipment, but then having 7 different pieces of equipment used across a 9-acre parcel doesn't seem to make sense that the sound is emanating from one single point. So I'm hoping to have the sound expert draw some lines from the pieces of equipment to show where they're going to be, where they were modeled from. So we can get an understanding of how that's going to work in reality. And also the crusher did not have a noise value associated to it. And we'd like to know how that was factored into the model.
And I think we understand that if there's 2 pieces of equipment running, that there's an additional factor of 3 decibels that's added to that. So are they gonna just run 1 piece of equipment at a time in order to get this model correct? Or is this reflecting actual work scenario where there's 3 or 4 things and pressure going?
The applicants have a response?
I would think procedurally, we'd prefer to have our noise consultant who's available speak to her study and the process there. That was a sequence we were anticipating, so
Yeah,
if we could, we did submit the sound study. I will say just, the sound study, in response to a Rule 20 request from the commission, it was asked that we add the crusher sound to that study, which we did and submitted that in response to Rule 20 request. So that should be on file. But I think what I'd like to do if we could is just get our sound expert up to describe what she did and methodology. It sounds like that's what we're hearing the questions on that.
Yeah, I think so. And that still gives Mike time for his travel, because then before we get to the other visual aesthetics.
Okay.
Well, that makes sense. It's timely to get to know us.
Who am I unmuting?
That would be Rebecca Shed.
Mr. Willard is now muted, I think. Becca, I think I've unmuted you.
Still
Wow.
muted from what I can see.
Rebecca?
Oh, there it is. I got it. Can you hear me?
All right, I'm a little rusty with this camera.
No, good. You're good. As long as everyone can hear me, I'll get started. Awesome. I'm Rebecca Shed. I'm with VHB. I'm a noise analyst on our team, and I conducted the sound study for the industrial park project at 2322 LaPorte Road. Morristown and Vermont don't have any statutes or regulations that establish a quantitative noise standard for this project, but through Act 250, there's the Berry Granite standard, and that has set precedent for sound from similar projects and activities such as the rock extraction. It sets a limit of 55 dBA at nearby homes. We used this as the target standard for the project. The detailed description of the study's methodology has been submitted in the sound study from October of last year of 2024. The study evaluated sound from periods of the subsequent rock crushing following blasting, and we studied the loudest anticipated activity. So we studied the tail end of phase 1 when that southern section would be more level than it is today, and the equipment would be closer to some of those sensitive locations. The figure that Peter has available shows the receptors, the blue circles. Those are the discrete locations that we modeled sound at. And the figure also shows the sound contours in the various colors, with red being the 60 dBA and the orange being the 50 dBA. The sound at the discrete locations representing the residential buildings was modeled at a height of 5 feet above ground. And the maximum predicted sound level at these locations, with all the equipment described in the study operating simultaneously, that maximum sound level was predicted to be 54 dBA, which is below the Berry Granite standard of 55. Additionally, some of the measures that Peter described previously that have been established through local approvals, we anticipate to further mitigate noise. And some of those are that no excavation or blasting or stockpiling are allowed within 200 feet of any property line. So that limits how close equipment can be to the property line, close to the receptors. No power activated sorting machinery is allowed within 300 feet of a street or property line, similarly reducing how close equipment can get to those homes. The blasting is limited to 3 days per year, and it's limited to certain hours and days of the week. So it's limited from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., Monday through Friday. And then general site non-blasting operations are limited from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. And then all site equipment will be required to be retrofitted with white noise backup alarms to reduce that backup noise occurring. And so based on the precedent standard set and various restrictions already put on the site through the planning approval, it is not believed that it'll have an adverse noise impact. If you'd like, I can directly answer some of those questions that have already been asked as well. Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca. It would be helpful. I didn't notice the decibel value for the crusher in the recent submittal. So curious what that is. And then just trying to get an understanding of where the pieces of equipment were modeled from within the extraction area. But to start with, just curious on the value.
Yeah, so the crusher noise, putting it into the same table layout that's in the sound study, was an L max of 78 decibels at 50 feet. It was not considered an impact device, and it had a usage factor of 20% applied. And then in terms of the location of the equipment, because it's a transient sound sources, so at some point your backhoe may be moving, but your dump truck may not be running, we've placed all equipment at a central location and modeled all of it operating simultaneously. So it was all located at a point in which it would be near to the property line, that 200 feet, but it's all running simultaneously rather than one piece of equipment closer to you, but like other equipment farther, if that makes sense.
In theory, I guess. In practice, I think given the phase 1 laydown area being very close to the eastern property line, your values are going to be a little different in that instance. Given the recent information on the crusher value and just all these questions, might it be possible to receive a copy of the modeling data so we could look into how it was done?
Yeah, if you provide a specific list of what modeling data you're looking for, I'm happy to provide that.
Okay, sure. From what I've heard, the CADNA A is the useful information. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah, we used the CADNA A sound modeling software.
Rebecca, Thea Alvin speaking. Could you tell me what pressure model it is that you used to use this sound model?
Yes, we used a piece of equipment from the BSI, that's the British Standards Institution for a crusher. The other equipment was modeled from the Federal Highway Administration roadway construction noise model. That noise model does not include crushers as equipment, so we used other sources for the crusher.
So a British one? Is
Correct.
that something that could we use in America? Is
It
that a
could,
model
yes.
that we could? Is that what this project is going to use?
At the time that the study was completed, we did not have specific equipment information from the applicant.
Peter, do you have that information now?
I wouldn't have the specific crusher make and model for you, but we could certainly prepare that. For the commission if
something-
if that
is that-
were relevant.
Need a permit?
I don't understand that.
Does the crusher need a permit, a special permit to have a crusher?
My understanding is the crusher activity is subject to the conditions of the activity.
So some crushers need permits and some don't, and it depends on what crusher they use if they need a permit. So they would need to tell you, right? What crusher they plan to use, and then you could say you need to get a permit for that.
Well, I think it would come under the plan, that we approved. I don't know if Susan has any background on that, but I've never seen that level of detail, but there's a
Actually,
plan and there's
both Pike and McLean quarry, sorry to talk over you.
no, it's okay. No, we still have the decibel limit overall. Go ahead.
You know, and one thing to keep in mind, this comes up obviously with excavation projects all the time because noise is so important. Modeling is used to demonstrate whether the project is expected to be able to meet conditions that are imposed. Ultimately, the commission will impose decibel conditions, and it is then the obligation of the permittee to do whatever it takes to meet that condition. So the modeling is intended to show, yes, we can meet that condition. So then the decibel condition is imposed, and then it's frankly on the applicant. If they submitted bad modeling and they can't meet those conditions, then they're gonna have to modify their operations in order to meet the decibel condition. So it's important to understand that modeling is a predictive process, but ultimately it's going to be a hard measurable decibel condition that the commission imposes.
Mike?
Yep.
Can I directly ask you a question?
Go on. He makes the rules. I don't.
Sure. Yeah.
Does anybody know if what was modeled isn't what was happening above or below? Like, is it a homeowner, like, we don't have decibel.
Well, ultimately, if people are concerned that it's too loud, in sort of lay terms, they have the ability to get in touch with the now called Land Use Review Board and their enforcement people, and they have the ability to go out and check. Or there may be a process set up where if you're concerned, you're able to reach out to the applicant and talk about it. So it's not up to, individuals aren't expected to go out and buy decibel meters and be out there doing that. If you're concerned, hey, that sounds a lot louder than what we expected, you have the ability to go to the enforcement people and they can check on it. And it's the permittee's obligation to meet whatever condition is imposed.
We have a question back here.
Yeah, I'm Dennis Nephew, a homeowner at 594 Cotton Road. The process you've laid out, speaking to the lawyer, process you've laid out puts all the burden on the neighbors after the fact. Like, oh no, the blasting was much louder than 55 decibels. prove it. One, the burden's on them. Two, it's 3 times a year, and how do we, what is the actual enforcement here? Because it seems to me that the only place that this could be controlled is at this state, as point in the process. It's not, oh, then it's on you to meet the thing. It's like, there needs to be real restrictions. Like, no, you can't go over that, and this is what you will use. There's, throughout all these criteria, it talks about the plan has to be clear enough for the board to actually approve it. This mitigation plan, for instance, oh, well, we'll do something in 10 years. That's not a plan. Can the board approve something that isn't a plan? Can the board approve, yeah, we think we can stay below 55 decibels, and you'll have to take our word for it, or is there a way that the board can actually impose conditions that we can be assured that it will be followed? And that's really unclear to me, given your answer.
Well, every permittee, regardless of the project, if it's a 10-house subdivision or an industrial park, when they get a permit, it's going to have a bunch of conditions, hours and phasing and what plans govern and all of that. And that's the way the process is set up. And then the initial obligation is on the permittee to make sure that they comply with those conditions. That's the way the permit process is set up. And if there is a violation, then it is a separate process. It's not a permitting process at that point. It's an enforcement process, and that is separate. And that's just the way permits are set up, not just this permit. And yes, and I'll certainly leave it to the commission, they're going to want to have conditions that are clear and effective to make sure that the project satisfies the Act 250 criteria. They need to be clear, so 2 different people reading them are going to read the same thing, that it's not ambiguous. And they need to be effective because ultimately it's, again, the burden on most criteria, not all, for the applicant to satisfy the commission that they will be able to meet these requirements. If they can't, and there are times, I mean, trust me, there are times when commissions impose conditions that make the project impossible to operate under the conditions. So, I mean, that's where the real discretion comes with this commission is coming up with requirements that are both clear and effective. And once that permit is issued, 100% of the burden for compliance shifts to the permittee. And if they violate it, then they open themselves up to an enforcement process, which is very, very different than the permitting process that we're going through here. And now, I'll be quiet.
Yeah, it's spot on. All right.
So then I would request that the commission have some conditions, if a permit is granted, that requires additional testing and modeling that involves the party so that we can be assured, because we have questions about whether this modeling is adequate. I believe your expert said that they modeled it after they'd already taken off 2 or 3 layers, so the ground is lower down. It's like, well, actually, sound's going to travel farther from a high point and have a bigger impact when it isn't shielded by hillside. So I have serious questions about whether that modeling is biased.
I just have one response on that specific last comment is that the crusher would only be active once the blasting occurs, and the blasting would take the hillside down to that level in which the crusher was modeled. So you wouldn't set a crusher up on top of a hill with nothing to crush. You have to get down to the level of the working level of that feature to be able to run that crusher. And that's why
The blasting itself has a sound in it. But that's obviously a high between.
If I might, with one last follow-up, in the Morristown Duhamel gravel sound study, they provided the sound level at the source area. In this study, it was modeled at 50 feet out. And so those values are quite different. And so in comparing what the town approved and this, it's hard to get an apples to apples comparison. I did a few calculations, and what I'm coming up with is an average of 11 decibels less in the MSI study than the town, averaging the equipment used, calculated to the source area, and then extrapolated over 50 feet. Basically, like, I'm taking a crash course and would hope to get a little bit of time to get the data that was used and respond with an expert. I've done enough to understand that it's hard to get the values below 55 in the numbers that I'm seeing. They're more like 61 to 67 decibels for the surrounding neighbors that were modeled on the map. So we have concerns about how the data was achieved.
And we have that testing will be forthcoming from the applicants that we talked about earlier from Rebecca.
Sorry, can you say that again?
The testing modeling, that's the modeling that Rebecca's gonna provide.
If the commission wishes for us to share that as part of a recess order, or we're happy to share.
Yeah.
Open process.
Seems fine.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, again, speaking of Brooke's point about crash course, as I said before, I'm a sculptor. This is all new to me. It impacts my home, so it's a passion project. And as a sculptor, I'm also passionate. As an Italian, I speak in my hands, so it's everywhere. I'm trying to restrain my Massachusetts nature. Nothing wrong with Massachusetts, it's just there. I have been learning progressively a lot over the past 6 months, I would say, in an intense way to look at this project. I'd like to know if there has been a fracture trace analysis done that talks about the source protected water area that feeds the town of Morrisville's town barn and the Pinecrest mobile home trailer park. So I understand that fracture trace is a way to understand the impacts in the hydrogeology of springs and source protected water areas. Is that correct?
Question for the applicant.
Fracture trace?
So what we'd like to do if we could is still continue to keep in mind our aesthetics expert and his timing.
Right.
So we did have criterion 3 later with my understanding procedurally. We do have our hydrogeologist here to
Okay.
speak to that, but I think just because we have our one guy who had to sort of fit this in,
That's right.
that would be my request, is if we could sort of stick to the outline.
Yes.
So
Let's see that. Go ahead.
I'd like to bring then Patrick Town up to talk about the aesthetics with regard to his home and some photographs that he would like to share.
I just have one question, and I think we're flexible, but my question was our understanding was it would sort of be applicant putting up their evidence, and then there would be some opportunities from the parties to cross and present.
Yeah, actually, so I know where you're going. Are there any more questions you mean for your expert?
Just thinking of it, felt, I didn't want to jump ahead, but it felt like we were transitioning from criterion 8 aesthetics on the rock extraction into potentially into the water tank. I don't know.
No, it's just direct to the.
Oh, okay, all right, then I'm fine.
Patrick has just had foot surgery, so we're gonna give him a chair. Just like that. I don't know if he.
Oh, he's
You can have that one. That was awesome. So, there you go. I think the most amazing thing about this project, win, lose, or draw for everybody, is that we as a group are inside this room together. I think that's really amazing. And I know I would hope that Mr. Roy did his research on me. I did my research on him, and I know that he plays ice hockey.
Among other things.
Among other things. Poorly, as I do. And I understand the value of team and when different skills reach different places and how important those things are. I wanted to share how much I have admired this man here who is nervous, and I'm gonna have a conversation with him to support the, this, so that it makes it easier for everybody in the room. Want to share this photograph with folks so you can see. Patrick, can you tell us about this photograph?
That's my two children laying up at the top of my, highest point of my land, which is right next to where, this is where the rock extraction is going to be.
So that would look right here.
Yes, basically, yes, it would look like that.
This is Patrick's house here.
Mhm.
And what do you do up there?
I have family get-togethers, birthday parties. We have, we always do a cleanup every spring. And sometimes in the fall, roasting marshmallows, sometimes sliding parties in the wintertime.
And how do you think that having, first of all, a quarry in your backyard is going to affect your backyard?
Well, my children have been pretty vocal about how ugly that's going to be.
And how old are your kids?
They are 12 and 11 right now.
So we're talking about the next 10 years of their backyard, their whole childhood from now forward.
Yes.
So that's an important part of your life that is going to completely change. Is that right?
Yes, and then when I first talked to them about this project, the first comment that came out of their mouth was, where's all the wildlife gonna go?
Mhm.
And I said, they'll have to be relocated on their own.
Yeah.
Or they'll die.
How about the sound from the crushing and blasting? How would that affect your play area for the kids and yourself?
You're gonna hear it, because it is right there. There's no getting around it. Depending on what they use for equipment. And how many pieces of equipment are gonna be running. And while this development is going on, are they gonna be building the pond at the same time they're crushing stone? Is there gonna be extra equipment in there? So, that's, the variables there can be much different at different times.
And do you have any experience at all with explosives and quarrying or dynamiting of any kind?
I've been around it. I don't really have any expertise per se, but I've been around it. I've seen them drill. I've seen things being blown up with mats, and then without mats. I've been on mountainsides when they have touched off, and you have to be very careful. You have to be looking up because you don't know where any rock material might be coming down. This has a concern of mine here, how much blasting they're gonna do at one time. How are they gonna cover that? How are they gonna keep the rock from taking off and becoming airborne? So that's one of my concerns there.
And I know that yesterday you and I talked about the main drilling and blasting company. The same company was drilling over in the Percy pit in 2008 when they shot an uncovered load, and that stone hit people in the Pinecrest Mobile Home Park, and a lady went to the hospital. It shot stone all over the, what we say dooryard. I don't know if you use that term in Chittenden County, but the area where where the town barn has all of their salt sheds, all that shot stone came out over there, and it was described as small meteor-like stone hit the trailers in the Pinecrest Trailer Park. So with the proximity, they used 450 feet as their distance to govern whether they were going to use a mat or not. The main drilling and blasting company did, and they shot it, and they didn't expect it to go as far as it did, but it did. So one of the concerns that we have is that in the blasting paperwork, they talked about that they would use those mats if they thought it was necessary. And we were hoping to get a condition in to the aesthetics of Patrick being in his backyard and not being in danger, his children in danger of being hit when those blasts are going off. If we can have a condition that mandates those mats be in use to cover the entire area, not at the discretion of the blasters, but as a flat rule. Were there other things we talked about?
I think we talked about
You?
possible contamination of water wells
Yeah.
because the Pine Crest
Is
Trail
that,
Park.
are we gonna talk about that now, or are we gonna
Well,
save water for a bit?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll just finish three, right?
Okay. All right, so we'll save that for now, and we'll save the traffic accidents. But we want to talk a little bit about what it looks like now. I have pictures of your backyard, Todd, that you gave me somewhere in here. Thank you, Ryan. Those are. So some of these are with reference to, this spring, but this is what it looks like. That's where we walked this morning.
Yes.
And this is what it looks like from Patrick's yard, where we were walking and pointing to different things. I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but this is the view from the knoll of Patrick's house. And this is the view from his house of that knoll. This is the view from his bedroom window. Of the knoll. And this is the view back to his house. And this picture, I'd like you to remember, we'll bring it back up, but this picture is also of the warehouse that will be on that corner looking down at his house. So in terms of later light pollution with regard to 8. The pictures are, yeah. Patrick, can you tell me a little bit about these pictures, how you how long have you lived at your house?
I've lived there, I've owned it for 13 or 14 years. I lived there for 3 or 4 years before that. So, you know, earlier with them saying how there were certain points that you could get to where the extraction of the rock would be visible. Yeah, if that's if you're going by at 50, 60 miles an hour and you're not really paying attention because there's cuts that go from my property through to their property. And you can definitely see where that rock extraction is going to be. I can see it quite a bit of the time, especially when they're working on that southern end of it, especially just for my house. If I'm on my lot or up on top where I have get-togethers and stuff, I'm going to see it all the time that I am there. So, so yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a big impact on me, myself, and that's not including everybody else between noise, dust, possible water contamination. It's a big undertaking for everybody if this goes through.
And would you think that 10 years is something temporary? Or would you think that that's a long time in your lifetime, you're 57, right? We established that I'm 56.
Yep.
Is 10 years, where are you gonna be in 10 years when this is gone to be in quarry?
I mean, I have no idea where I'll be because I'm not, ever since I heard about this project, I haven't been so excited about living there. I don't want to be next to all this noise and having my children go up there. You know, I grew up farming. I actually farmed some of these fields when I was a teenager. You know, I understand that everything can't stay the same, but this project is massive.
Thank you. Dennis, do you wanna come on?
Yeah, I have questions to the expert. Again, Dennis Matthew,
Just on 8, thank you.
just on 8. How did they, so anyway, I'll explain what my question is. Again, I live here in this, but that I own this place. I can't live there yet. Little background, signed contract to buy the house in October 2021, and then there were problems with the title. Finally purchased it in October 2023, and then there were problems with the septic system. So I had to wait another 13 months for that permit, and now I can finally start getting rid of the mold. Anyway, trying to move into this place, which is why you haven't seen me at any previous meetings, because I wasn't party before buying the thing. Anyway, the question I've got goes to the standards of criterion 8, and the expert mentioned the Queechy analysis, which amongst other things mentions shocking and offensive, and on what grounds did and I want to lay out the whole context of the question as opposed to, on what grounds does the expert decide that something is not shocking and offensive to members of the community? One of the things is criterion 8 is intended to ensure that as development does occur, reasonable consideration will be given to the visual impact on neighboring landowners, the local community, and on the specific scenic resources of Vermont, the Green Mountain State. And you drive by there, and this is a small green mountain on historic Route 100 between the quaint little village of Stowe and all the little farms. And then there's this spot next to the airport, and the airport has only 1-story buildings. It doesn't have 3, 5-story buildings. It has low buildings because it's an airport. So we're going to knock down a little mountaintop right in view of the highway at the gateway to the town. And right after that, you're back to farms. How does this fit into the context? How does taking out this mountain not shock and offend? Then there's the question, also in the criterion, community standards. In previous case law, they found that in Barry, the community standards weren't clear enough because it was just about in general. But then in Taft Corners, they were specific. The town plan comes up later, but the town plan said specifically, no more rock quarries. There's one nearby. You can't see it from Route 100. We don't want that in this town anymore. That's a community standard. It's perfectly clear. How do you say that this is within community standards to put an open pit rock quarry in view of the highway in the midst of the rolling farmland? Those are my questions to the expert. I would like to point out to the commission that the experts can say things, but that doesn't make it fact. That's just their putting words on a page. You have to decide, is this actually true? Can you believe it? Or are they selling you a story? Those are my questions to the expert. On what basis do you say this isn't shocking and offensive? No answer?
Well, I mean, I respond.
I see Mike unmuted, so I defer to Mike Willard to respond to that question.
Yes, Mike here. So I guess addressing the question about shocking or offensive. So that follows under the second step of the Queechy analysis. And just to refresh everyone's sort of background on this, so shocking and offensive is really, in order for a project to be deemed shocking and offensive, this is to the average person, which is a neutral party or a not an affected neighbor. The project would need to be entirely inconsistent with its surroundings, the surrounding land use, or exceptionally out of scale with its surroundings. And so using that as the baseline, as what this shocking and offensive is sort of based on, we went through various documents with the town plan, the regional plan, and sort of reviewed various criterion through there and looking at things. And so we determined that it, the initial step one, we talked about that there would be potential adverse impact due to the introduction of the temporary rock extraction, specifically for that phase 2 portion, recognizing it was a change in the landscape form from existing conditions. We're not denying that. But we have determined that the project has made efforts to reduce potential visibility from surrounding roads, nearby residents, and public lands through phasing of the project, careful crafting of how this landform would be sort of the rock extraction would take place, with specific concerns from views from these public vantage points, Cochrane Road, Laporte Road, Stagecoach Road. The landscape mitigation is being introduced with the retention of heavily wooded areas that are going to sort of help harmonize the project with the surrounding landscape. Additionally, when you consider the project's context with what is in the region and adjacent to the project within a half-mile radius, you have an airport to the east. There are other gravel and rock extraction sites around. And this project site is identified within the industrial land use district for the town. And so many of these factors are taken into consideration when reviewing what would be considered shocking and offensive through that process. It's about views, visibility, perception, duration of views. All these things sort of weigh into it. And again, this is from the view and perspective of a casual observer, not necessarily an affected neighbor.
So, if I, go ahead.
I built these models to talk about what would potentially be shocking. And perhaps it could be said that if you planted a bunch of 2-inch caliber trees, which 2 inches is bigger than a banana, and a little bit taller than me, maybe 6 or 8 feet tall, that planting a tree of that size, even a bunch of them, is in no way going to obstruct your view of removing an entire knoll that's 55 feet tall from the ground to the top of the rocks. That doesn't account for the top of the trees. That's another 55 or so. This is a scale model in cardboard, modeling the knoll, the wetlands. We walked to about here today and about to here. There's tributaries to the Ryder Brook. There's wetlands. There's all sorts of endangered species on the property. And the removing of this feature of land, by the way, Mr. Smyer, is it 12 acres or is it 8.5?
It's 8.5 to 9 in that range.
Okay. So maybe we'll change that in the town decision so that they know that difference, because it was 12 in the DRB review. So going from this forested wetlands with a really poor crop of corn to this, I would say that that's pretty shocking. We're talking about 26 buildings, and this is just an architect's rendering because we don't know what those buildings are actually really going to look like. These are 50 by 100 blocks, just to put a placekeeper in. What they had said is that they were going to keep the silo if they could. So in terms of shocking or offensive, I understand that we're just talking about the quarry aspect, but when you look at the whole thing, you have to take the whole picture. The end goal is to get we're talking about 3 lots for the quarry versus the balance of the value, which is really the thing, the cost of that material that they're going to gain from being able to sell it. There's 3 lots, this one, 18, 17, and 16. There's only 3 of 26 that we're talking about that they're going to gain from quarrying that mountain. But the whole other thing is these whole 23 other manufacturing facilities is really clumped together. It's very, very tight by comparison to what the airport is, how the business district looks. So the shock of the magnitude of like quadrupling the volume of the industrial area. I wanted to point these out in terms of shock and awe for the average person passing by. If you were a tourist in your Airbnb in Stowe, traveling to Morrisville to do your grocery shopping, and you came upon this instead of that, you'd be like, well, I was gonna swear. Not do that. I think it's important to know that this is a huge and massive change. And we're trying to understand and prepare and learn how are we gonna live with this huge change in our environment? And, yeah, I still I can't even find the words to describe how challenged I am. But Quechua is specifically for the average person, right? It's not for us who live there. But for us who live there, this is a passion project. This is our home. And it's critically important to us that we maintain the quality of life. That's why we moved here. We are here because we love it here. We are not here because we love an industrial park. We're here because we love the pastoral landscape that we've come to expect. This is the scenic corridor on the way between two quaint little villages.
If I can respond again to the expert, I would like to say, you repeated that you have determined, which does not answer my concerns, like based on what? From what I understand, you did your study from the viewpoint of one spot in the airport or something like that. I think that's what was written. I'm talking about the context includes you're coming into town, you're coming through rolling farmland, countryside, you see the mountains, and then there's this word they keep using. Two words. There's temporary and incidental. And these are crucial to their legal argument. If it's temporary, then it doesn't count. If it's incidental, then it's not a quarry. This is a 10-year quarrying open pit project. This is not something you're not going to notice next year. This is not temporary for anybody living here or driving through. You will see it, and you'll see it for a long time. Their study is from one viewpoint, just like their sound study was from one spot, low down. They're on the other side of the highway where you can't actually see it. We stood there, we stood right here during the site walk today. The highway was above us, and the knoll was above us. You know that you can see the whole thing from the highway. Everybody coming in and out of town will see this for at least 10 years, if they're done in 10 years. That's the gateway to Morrisville from now on. Is that the community standard as required in the Act 50 law? Is it incidental? They're going to sell 80% or more of the gravel somewhere else. Or is that just a cover for running a quarry in a place that's outlawed? The expert said specifically, oh, well, there's a quarry nearby. Exactly. The town knows exactly that there's a quarry nearby. That's why they took it out of the town plan. They don't want it there. It was a conscious decision, not, oh, well, there's one nearby. That's not how standards work. The town adopted a plan. There's your community standard.
If I can briefly, Arthur.
Sure.
And I'll keep it very brief. I would also point out that the community has zoned this parcel industrial, that the Communities Development Review Board has determined that this project is compatible with the town plan. And understandably, the adjoining landowners don't want change. But the standard that the neighbors would have this district commission impose would essentially freeze Vermont in time and render it little more than a theme park where people can drive through and see things never changing. As was pointed out by Mr. Smyer at the beginning of this, there is an extraordinary shortage of viable, available industrial park capacity in this county and in this state.
How does this pertain to aesthetic?
So, question.
So, with respect to the question of community standards, which is what he was just addressing, I would like to point out that those who have been elected and appointed to represent the community have determined that this project is appropriate and needed.
We're talking about the quarry, not about the entire industrial park. We're talking about these three lots. Is this quarry is one of the things that the board has to decide, is the quarry okay? If the quarry's not okay, Then you can say no to the quarry and yes to the industrial park. That's within your purview. And the question of whether there should be an industrial park in the town can have an industrial park. But they said they don't want a quarry. And the DRB is not empowered to override the town plan.
Saw a hand in the back.
I just make one request. We have 45 minutes until our aesthetic expert has to leave, but we still need to get to the water supply system.
Right, yes. You have a brief comment back there?
I do. I have a question.
Can you just state your name for the record, please?
Alexis George Owen, 2311 Stagecoach Road. I own the Loyal Valley Dance Academy, which is in the center of town, and our home studio is at the Stagecoach Road location. My question about the maximal decimal sound, does that change according to location? If it's a residential area, if it's a business, if it's a children's program, a school, do those, does that criteria change?
I don't believe so. I mean,
It does not. It's 55 dBA at residential structure and 70 dBA at the property line of the site.
Okay, it's not different for children versus adults. There's no higher risk depending on your age.
There is not.
Interesting to me. I have a children's program, a business. I've been there with the business since 2006. It was originally Enchanted Woods Wellness Center, and now it's the Loyal Valley Dance Academy. Obviously, the tanks that we're going to address later is a concern, but just this, the idea of the sound, my concerns about my location is not just the aesthetic, which is a very valid point that we're all concerned about, but my concern is about the well-being of the children, the safety, the disturbance to the possible programming that I do, that starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and that goes through the day. I do have programming all year long. It's not just summer. So that is a point that I wanted to bring up, that I do have not just my home there, and I'm concerned with the aesthetics and the potential of what's going to happen close to my property line, but the sound and the residue that we've talked about that Thea has so clearly brought up, and her understanding of the dust and the quarry and the stone, all of that is a great concern to me and to the program and to the potential disadvantage and unsafety issues for our children.
thank you. We need to jump to the rest of the aesthetics discussion with the expert who's only got 45 minutes left with us. So we're going to cover the industrial park and even more specifically, the water tank, water system situation.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to take those in reverse order. We do the water tank first, and then get to the industrial park. I'm going to call Mike Willard back to speak to the water tank site.
Good afternoon, Mike Willard here. So in regards to the water tank site that's sort of on the western side of the parcel up near Stagecoach Road, here it might be worth bringing up the exhibit under the line of sight cross sections. There's a site plan that sort of depicts what the layout of the project looks like in that location. So the appendix C is in Charlie. LA 1.1, right? So just for orientation, north is to the right. Stagecoach Road is top of page running north-south. You can see adjacent landowner names and addresses sort of identified who are in sort of immediate proximity. So the two tanks are depicted by those circles, one's solid circle, one's dashed. They were anticipated as coming in and phased installation. So a new curb cut is being established off of Stagecoach Road, which would clear about 60 feet worth of trees based on the site grading and to get the road in. But what was interesting here is that the site design was done in a meaningful way so that there was no sort of direct line of sight specifically from Stagecoach Road into the project. So you can see the road comes in curves, and generally the pad is sort of off to the side, offset from the entry drive coming in. Existing grading is being cut down by several feet, so that will help sort of reduce the tank's overall sort of presence on the site. That's another key sort of aspect of the site design for the tank site itself. You can see on the site plan, there's sort of those curved squiggly lines that indicate where the existing tree canopy and dense forested areas are. And so that section between Stagecoach Road and the tanks themselves, that's what's going to be retained. And so the narrowest portion of that tree canopy is about 124 to 121 feet of retained sort of dense, mature forest along that edge of the road. And so we have then set cross sections through the tank, and that's what those sort of lines are crossing through with the circles and arrows. And we can sort of show those in a minute. But wanted to point out that, so as you drive by Stagecoach Road, the duration of view, if you're headed northbound for a driver, that 60-foot window there, that's about a 1 second duration of view for a traveler headed northbound. And so there's an introduction of landscape mitigation that's proposed with evergreens and deciduous trees to sort of buffer and block potential views into the site directly at the tanks for that sort of 1 second in that location. So that sort of provides sort of a general overview of the site itself, the site grading, and sort of retention of the sort of forested area around it. So maybe the next couple of pages, Peter, we can walk through. So zooming into section A, so this section is in proximity to the tank. So this section sort of heads north. So that's the George and Owen property to the north, which is 2311 Stagecoach Road. So you can see the existing topography is that solid black line on the plan. We've sort of depicted where the sort of leveling of the pad is occurring. So you can see the grading is being cut down so that the tank again would have sort of a less prominence on the site. And the foreground trees, that's the retention of the existing forested area around the tanks, would all be retained. And then sort of a line of sight was sort of projected from the ground level of the nearby residence up to the tank. So you can see if you're on the property where your sort of line of sight would be in the direction of the tanks. And we've identified sort of distances from the closest part of the residence and the parcel boundaries sort of over to the edge of the tanks. So the furthest distance is the 525 feet away, and the closest is 432 feet away from the tanks. Section B is in boy, so this would be taken from Stagecoach Road itself. So you can see there's two vehicles depicted in this graphic, which would represent northbound and southbound travelers on Stagecoach Road. And again, line of sight sort of projecting over through the existing sort of dense vegetation that would be retained on site to the tanks. The next sheet is section C. And so this is a view coming across Stagecoach Road, essentially due west. So this would be from the Eisenbaum property at 2436 Stagecoach Road. Their house, the elevation starts climbing on their property. And you can see Stagecoach Road sort of in the middle. And so what we did say in our report is that there is potential likelihood to see the tops of the tanks over the existing tree canopies, that existing vegetation to remain. Because the average height of the trees in that area, we were using it based on the height of the existing utility poles out there, which is about 35 feet. So most of the dense vegetation in that area is somewhere in the 40 and 50 foot plus tall range. You can see that the natural grade sort of dips down to the west of Stagecoach Road and then starts climbing back up to the tank site. But again, the existing grade is sort of being cut down so that the height of the tank is mitigated and reduced at its presence on the site.
All right, any questions on?
So this is, Doug and David, who are the adjacent, landowners up there. And they're gonna have a conversation about, the impacts that this has on their, lifestyle and aesthetic of their homes.
Yeah, David Eisenbaum. Oh, David and Doug. Oh, Doug over, yeah. How's your check out?
That was his wife earlier. For reference, this is a scale, model of this map. This was cut in a laser out in Burlington. And, for reference, these are the tanks that have been proposed. So you can see, they would be here-ish on this model.
So, real quick, the background on that property is, used to be, the Greaves Farm Association, I believe. They had 10-acre lots going right down Stagecoach Road, on this side of 100 side of Stagecoach Road. It's all wetland going down through there. The swath that they're talking about where the road comes in and then goes towards my house, which goes right in front of Dave's. That's a kind of a low point there. They're avoiding a ledge probably because I'm on the same ledge of the house. Anyway, the 10 acres lots that were sold had covenants on it where everything had to be aesthetically approved. You couldn't put aluminum siding, you couldn't paint your house yellow, you know, different things like that, which aesthetically fits into your environment. I don't know what these tanks are gonna look like. But when you're on Stagecoach Road and you're looking to where these sites are gonna be, it's pretty open. This man's talking about dense forest. Now, you can see right to the edge of the ledge itself. Yeah, there's trees there. But when you put two big blue water tanks, each tank being bigger than my house, it's gonna be hard to hide that aesthetically. Even though for a couple times now, they're gonna lower the footprint several feet. That would mean the tanks are still gonna be twice as tall as the ceiling. So, yeah, you go down 7 feet, they're still gonna be 20-something feet above. Okay, so I don't know how they're gonna hide that. There's the map that was up here before. You saw some areas where I'm not trying to change where they're putting anything. And I don't want to have it like, ooh, those tanks would be better off on someone else's property, so they can see it, I don't have to. We're just taking the can down the road. The thing I'm looking for is this map, and I know you can't see it from anywhere, it was up here a little bit bigger. We're talking about these properties up here, and you notice that there's my property, there's the one where they're gonna put the tanks, there's Linda Greaves. Then there's this other one, I think Herchak owns that too. I assume this is all this stuff, right? Boy, if you look across from McGee Road, I think it's McGee, there's a vast trail that goes down towards the ledge. It goes twice as far towards their project than where these tanks would be and level. I don't know. I wasn't part of the planning, obviously. But anyway, they're gonna be blasting and doing stuff there. And I'm sure we can work out when they can do it and stuff. We have summer programs for kids, June, July, August. things like that could be worked on, but I just don't understand how you can put these two huge tanks right next to my property value. I have a beautiful spot. Aesthetically, it's beautiful. People love it there. It's like it's a retreat. If I'm trying to sell a house now, beautiful 3-bedroom lot home on 10 acres, abutting 2 huge water tanks. I don't, everyone's talking about property value, property. It's the way it is. I just have a hard time with these people that are saying there's a dense forest there. You won't see them. Well, I've got a real quick one here from the wetland. The wetland, which I'm sorry, you can't see it. But this is the where I butt up next to the property here. I'm standing on my property looking towards Stowe, and I'm looking at the wetland. And the wetland goes quite a bit up to where that road comes in. But from the road, you can see that. From Stagecoach Road, you can see all this. So I don't know how they become invisible. And we walked the site today. I could see my house, my mother-in-law's house is also on the property. I could see that. I can see I could look out my window and see Route 100. I could hear the traffic. Stagecoach Road now, 60 miles an hour. You know, if they fly down there now, more traffic's gonna be coming on Stagecoach, but it's just one of those things where, okay, yeah, as we progress and water tanks are needed, all this stuff we're talking about, we had so far today, everyone's got that concern, but it's gotta start there. They're gonna clean that rock. They're gonna have to have water. So, yeah, we're talking about excavation and all that kind of blasting. Well, they're gonna have to take some blasting there, I guess. I'm just concerned about, this is where it's gonna have to start in order to clean the rock that they're gonna get out. And so, yeah, you might be 10 years down the road. I'm 6 months. I just don't know how they're gonna make those tanks. I'll do sense.
Just one clarification, there's no rock washing proposed. Part of the project, there's crushing, but no washing of aggregate that is proposed.
Yeah, no, there's no washing on my spot. There's a possible blasting site. And when we had an earthquake back in 20 years ago over near Plattsburgh, a mortar fell out of my fireplace. We'd be blasting 200 feet away from my house on the same ledge. Let me know.
I'd also like to add that we have year-round programming. We have full-day programming in the summers, June through August. And I have children ages 2, as young as 2, so the decimal amount was up in 21. But we have year-round programming at that location.
Dave, do you have any questions for the expert while we still have it for 25 minutes?
Yeah, I think actually, if anything, I'd rather give my presentation and let the expert respond to anything I've had to say.
Okay. Because we still need to do the rest of, he needs to be here also for the rest of the industrial parks.
Council Mahoney and I are probably gonna give something brief on the rest of the park, but we felt like this was the area to.
Okay, yeah, so we'll still have time to keep them online. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there was one point of clarification. Somebody, I believe I heard someone mention that tanks were going to be blue. I don't think that that's an accurate statement. They were proposed to be a dark forest green.
So my name is David Eisenbaum. I live at 2436 Stagecoach Road. Depending on what data point you look at in the applicant's permit request, that's anywhere from 430 to 530 feet from the proposed water tank site. I purchased the home in 2021. Moved there with my wife and then 1-year-old. We found out we were having a second kid and decided to put on a second story addition to make more room. Fringe benefit of that is the view that, they've mentioned with the tops argument. And I'll say we're heavily invested in the home and the location. It is, as is the case with most people, our biggest asset, biggest debt as well. And its property value is of significant importance to us, which I would say is something that the average person would consider, not just an interested party, a neighbor. We also have sentimental attachment to it. It's where we intended to raise our family. I know that carries very little weight in this forum, so I won't dwell on it. But at the moment, I live there with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, my wife. 2 of them have reactive airway disease, which raises questions about any kind of silica or other material to be blasted into the air, 430 to 530 feet from our home. Not to mention the impact of that blasting on the structure itself and the water supply. We'll cover that later, I suppose. Additionally, I've invested a ton of my own time, even going part-time at work to finish the work on that home. So that's kind of the background. I work in emergency management and planning, an EMT locally, very part-time. I studied architecture at Cornell, Mr. Roy's alma mater, I believe, and went to UVM for undergrad. And rather than just sort of ask questions of the experts, what I've done is look at their Queechee Lakes analysis and essentially produce a rebuttal. But rather than bore you all with my voice, I'm going to ask for help of some of my associates to read through that, and happy to have the applicant representatives respond to it afterwards. I've also provided you all with a copy of that with the associated appendices. There's one additional one which I'll provide now, but
What would you like me to read?
Just start at the top.
The context of the water tank site. Per 10 VSA subsection 6086A8, the commission relies on a 2-part test to determine whether a project satisfies criterion 8. First, it determines whether the project will have an adverse effect under criteria 8. In the process, the board looks to whether a proposed project will be in harmony with its surroundings, or, in other words, whether it will fit the context within which it will be located. In making this evaluation, the board examines a number of specific factors, including the nature of the project's surroundings, the compatibility of the project's design with those surroundings, the suitability for the project's context of the colors and materials selected for the project, the location from which the project can be viewed, and the potential impact of the project on open space. Below, we argue that the proposed water tank site is not compatible with its surroundings. Page 9 of the applicant's aesthetics analysis report claims the size and scale of the proposed water tanks is compatible with its surroundings for several reasons. The rock extraction site is located within Morristown's industrial zoning district. I want to hold up this visual for a quick second. We realized that they said forest green, but you can forest green this blue picture. The rock extraction site is located within Morristown's industrial zoning district. The water tank site is located within Morristown's rural residential with agriculture zoning district. Both the rock extraction site and the water tank site are near other commercial and industrial uses in the immediate area, such as the Morrisville Stowe State Airport, other stone gravel extraction operations, the Morristown Transfer Station, and the Morristown Public Works Town Garage, and commercial scale solar generation projects north and south of the project site. The applicant has chosen to combine the fit consideration for the rock extraction site and water tank site together in its analysis, rather than affording them the distinction both in the planning and analysis process. This is noteworthy, given that they exist in distinct zoning districts with distinct contexts. More on this below. This choice by the applicant should raise questions about the diligence of its analysis and the conclusions it draws. Moreover, as the applicant's analysis clearly states, the proposed water tank site is in a rural residential with agricultural zoning district, not the industrial zone where the rock extraction site is planned. The applicant claims that the water tank placement is compatible with its surroundings because the tank water site, rural residential with agriculture zoning, is near other commercial and industrial uses in the immediate area. However, the locations referenced as being in the immediate area are in fact in commercial or industrial zones, not the rural residential with agriculture zone where the water tanks are proposed. The applicant's use of the term near misrepresents the actual distances involved as demonstrated by the following factual measurements. The source for these are Google Maps. Morrisville Stowe State Airport is 2.6 miles away. Other stone gravel extraction operations, we are assuming this is the Percy gravel pit on the Cochrane Road, as the applicant has not been specific, is 1.5 miles. The Morristown Transfer Station, the Morristown Public Works Town Garage is 1.6 miles. The commercial scale solar generation project north of the project site is 2.2 miles. The commercial scale solar generation project south of the project site is 2.5 miles. It is worth noting that the locations above in the Percy gravel pit on the Cochrane Road, Morristown Transfer Station, Morristown Public Works Town Garage, and the commercial scale solar generation project north of the project site are only visible from secondary access roads, and a person could very realistically live in the area and never see them or know they were even there due to their discrete locations. None of the locations are visible from the water tank site or Stagecoach Road in the vicinity of the water tank site. None of these locations are visible from 2436 Stagecoach Road to residents most adversely impacted aesthetically by the proposed water tanks. The board may consider questioning the applicant's decision to be so vague in its description of the nearby locations, just used as a justification for their analysis of the water tank site is as it fits into the Quechee Lakes analysis. Appendix 7 provides a map detailing the distinct and different nature of the Stagecoach Road corridor relative to the locations and zones the applicant has claimed are in the same context. The map in the Appendix Y shows that the Stagecoach Road corridor is separate and exists as a uniquely non-industrial, non-commercial area within the town and region. It is worth noting that it is a popular destination for out-of-state bike tours, leaf peepers, local recreationalists. It is featured as the #1 bike route of the Stowe Tourism website.
Ms. Elton, can I just pause you there? Right about, you've got a 7-page brief here. It's very unusual to have these read into the record. They don't need to be read into the record. We take it under submission and it's automatically part of the record. And you're reciting a lot of law that we already know. And I think just for the benefit of everybody in the room, and people's time and the time of the expert, if you could get to those questions for the expert that you thought you were gonna have, because you now have 15 minutes left with us.
All right, well, I imagine the folks in the room would have been curious about some of the law behind this, but.
This will be distributed to everybody, obviously. It's part of the record. We want to make sure everybody sees this, but we don't need to enunciate every single word. Thank you.
All right, well, I guess then I'll simply ask the expert about some of their evidence that they've provided. So if we look at cross-section C, you can maybe bring that up. So this seems to be the foundation of the applicant's analysis and conclusions about the impacts aesthetically from my home. There's no actual dimensions near my home, but it looks like the grids are about 10 feet. I'd ask the expert to kind of tell me at about what height at the house level that line of sight was drawn.
Yeah, so the line of sight typically is drawn, assuming about a 6 to 7 foot elevation height.
Is that because that's where people look from?
Right, if you were sort of standing outside the residence, that's sort of what we're using as a gauge, basically.
Standing outside the residence, not looking from inside the residence.
Right.
So by that logic, why not do it from the highest point on my property, which is actually a good 30 feet higher?
When you say property, you're
If
saying.
it's not relevant where the line of sight is from in the house and it's just on the property, why would you choose that location?
Well, generally speaking, we use the front of the residence because if you're in back of the house, then you would have intervening structure in front of you. So the line of sight starts typically at the front of the property, and then we go adjacent to the residential structure is what is sort of the standard.
Okay. Well, I guess I would submit that what's really relevant is the line of sight from a window in the home.
And we
given
were
that's-
made
that's
aware
where
of
we
your
started.
second story addition. So this graphically was trying to represent your two-story addition above and beyond what was there when when we were sort of on site. 'Cause we saw the house was under construction. And Peter Smyer noted that there was I think it was a second story being added on. So this graphic was meant to sort of depict your second story addition with lack of sort of detail on that.
So I produced my own drawing actually to depict the second story addition. I'd like to present that here, and it's actually way far off. I've retained your image in there and your line of sight, and I've gone ahead and drawn a line of sight from the second story window. I've also submitted in the appendices to my submittal an architectural plan of the home. And as far as I can tell, from the about 5-foot height that the line of sight you chose to draw to the actual line of sight from a second story window. So that's 16.5 feet difference, which pretty significantly adjusts the line of sight. And I would argue significantly adjusts your analysis and conclusion that the only thing visible will be just the tops of the tanks. Any response to that?
It might be hard. Mike, it doesn't have the benefit of seeing the exhibit.
Yeah, so again, the purview of the analysis again is done by the casual observer. And so what we've done here is we did identify that you being an adjacent neighbor being the closest one. And so the line of sight was specific to your property, trying to depict what the potential views would be. And so I think one of the most important parts here too is just recognizing the vegetation that is being retained in front of the tank. So I guess we can sort of walk through how much of the tank would be seen from your property. We didn't have the benefit of getting onto your site because it is private property. But the idea here is that if you slice through the bias here, it's over 200 feet of existing vegetation between you and the tank that is being retained. And by and large, that existing vegetation is screening the majority of the tank. And that
Like
certainly
that conclusion that you drew, pardon me, that conclusion that you drew, that it would be screening majority of the tank, seems to be flawed by about 16.5 feet, which is pretty significant. So I just have to question that conclusion that you've drawn. It just seems like your calculations were a little off. I appreciate that the width of the screening is approximately 230 feet, but that seems largely irrelevant given the height discrepancy of 16.5 feet. Also,
yeah, I haven't had the benefit of seeing your exhibit, so I'm not sure what you're referencing.
That's fair. When I met with Peter or spoke with Peter immediately after the DRB meeting, I offered a site visit. I was told that you would be doing it virtually instead. So I really have to challenge that notion that due to private property, you were not allowed. Additionally, Jim Mahoney, another representative of the applicant, was in my home prior to the DRB meeting and stood in that second story window. I guess I'll ask you a little bit about the fit and the context for the water tank site. Do you live in Morrisville?
Pardon me, I missed that question. Do I live in Morrisville?
Do you live in Morrisville?
I do not.
You don't, okay. So your analysis and the Queechy-like analysis that you did to determine fit, context, and the tank site being harmonious with its surroundings is based on, I guess what you put in the report, driving around, taking photos, and the proximity of those other features in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And you're aware that none of those features are along the Stagecoach Road corridor, are in that zoning district or visible from that part of Stagecoach Road?
Right, so that analysis is done, again, it's a higher level review of what's in the immediate area and sort of adjacencies. And so if you go to the south off of, Golf Course Road and Cochrane Road there, that the quarry operation there is, I think it was misstated in the earlier representation by what was read to the audience, but that is like 0.6 miles from the water tank site. And so it's
As a crow
all, again,
flies.
it's based on, that is correct. Because it's all based
Right,
on
but
context of the immediate
The
area.
context is
If you
for
were, if
humans
an
that live in
individual was
Morrisville.
driving the local roads, that's how we base it, is what they're seeing in the immediate vicinity in the area of the project. And so it takes in full context of what's happening in the surrounds of the site itself.
I've lived at 2436 Stagecoach Road for several years. I have never been to the transfer station or the gravel pit on Cochrane Road. I've never been to the solar farm. In fact, this made me aware that it even existed. It's off Route 100. It's not visible from Route 100. The only features that are visible to me, having driven around here over the last, lived in the area for close to 5 years, are the airport and the solar farm south of the project. So respectfully, I really have to challenge the analysis and the conclusion that you've drawn in your Queechy Lakes analysis. And that's just speaking to the water tanks, which again, are not an industrial zone. They're in a rural residential with agriculture zone. And along the entire length of Stagecoach Road from Stowe to Cadiz Falls Road, there's nothing but sparsely populated homes, single-family homes on large lots, small farms, and a single commercial establishment, a restaurant in a historic building. You've chosen to lump your analysis and the conclusions that you drew from that analysis about the rock extraction site and the water tank together. They exist in different contexts. They exist in different zones. And I would ask that the district commission really consider what you've submitted in your analysis. I'd also like to ask you about some of the mitigating steps you've taken. On a number of occasions, as represented in my report and the appendices I've provided, I did request some steps that could be taken. Moving the tanks was the biggest one. I've also provided in the appendix to support that the amount of area that the applicant owns at that elevation or higher, because I was told that that elevation was critical to have a gravity feed for the water supply. As a side note, I'd have to question why the applicant, who's investing a ton of money in this project, couldn't put in some kind of mechanically pressurized system that allows the tanks to be put at a lower elevation to make some degree of mitigating impact on really anybody's aesthetics. That's a sidebar. As you'll see in what I've submitted, there are quite a few acres of available space at or above that elevation that the property owner, the applicant, owns. Despite my requests to move the tanks, the justification I was given largely was the plans are already drawn. We're not willing to change them. That was prior to this hearing by many, many, many months. And that is in the record. I would also point out that there are other mitigating steps. You could have more squatter tanks. You could bury the tanks. Well, anyway, I'll let you respond to that. All right, Mike, you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. I thought you were making
Sorry, I was just
statements,
gonna let
not
you-
questions.
Oh, no, I said I'll let you respond to that.
Okay, I
mitigating
guess I
steps.
missed
It-
your,
it is-
I guess I missed what your question was. It sounded like you were making statements.
My question is, can you address the potential mitigating steps I've proposed? Moving the tanks to an alternate location on the applicant's property, having shorter tanks, burying the tanks, grading further down to have them go lower. Just a couple of options so that I don't have to see the tops of tanks or really any part of the tank. Again, I assume you did consider some of these mitigating steps as part of the Act 250 process, as is required.
Is there a question here?
Yes.
I just wanted him to answer.
The explicit question is, can you please address what mitigating steps were taken other than putting a 35-foot tall, two 35-foot tall water tanks across from my home and saying, well, you'll just see the tufts. I provided, I think just now, 4 potential mitigating steps. Did you consider any of them?
So to recap, some of the mitigating measures that were taken is that the tank site was chosen several feet back from Stagecoach Road, retaining the existing vegetation between the road and the tank site itself.
That's because of wetlands.
Actually, the wetlands are mapped on the project site, and you could see if the project wanted it, it could have pushed the tank site much closer to Stagecoach Road. So those wetlands were identified, but the tank site is actually quite a bit back from the wetlands. The existing grades were identified as an opportunity to sort of level the site out and reduce the overall tank's heights, presence, and appearance on the property. So that was a mitigating step that was considered and proposed. And then also the introduction of landscape mitigation, specifically for the views that might be seen by the casual observer driving northbound on Stagecoach Road with views into the tank site itself. So those were the mitigating steps that were addressed.
I'll point out.
I would just point out the water system design, there are many factors to this project, and the water system design and the tank siting itself is a combination of not just, once the site was selected, we worked on these mitigating factors that the experts spoke about, but fitting the tank into the site requires a more comprehensive view of all criteria. We have impacts that we have to consider in terms of tree clearing, in terms of impacts to the land, and this site was selected based on many factors, not necessarily just moving it to and fro in response to.
So you can document that of all the other locations that the applicant owns at or above that elevation, which again assumes that a neighbor should bear the burden so that you can have a gravity feed rather than a mechanical one. So we'll put that to the side. Putting that to the side, you can demonstrate that you ruled out every other possible location at or above that elevation on the applicant's property adjacent to the proposed industrial park.
I think our testimony is just that there's not, that there's suitable mitigation and screening for the tank as it's currently set. So I defer to the aesthetics analysis and the aesthetics expert as to how this conforms with criteria.
Yeah, then I will submit to the record that it is not apparent to me that you meaningfully considered relocating the tanks to another location that was available, and that you've not demonstrated that you did your due diligence on that mitigating step. So let's move on to another one. Let's talk about shorter tanks. Is there any reason why you couldn't have done shorter tanks?
I guess I'd like to just pause here for a moment. Or perhaps I could have the project civil engineer who designed the tanks could possibly explain, the basis for a slightly taller tank and sort of the optimization.
Hi, my name is Jeff Swaber. I'm a civil engineer at Grenier Engineering. I worked on designing the water system. So this water system serves 2 functions for the property. It provides drinking water and also fire protection. So a lot of the elevations and pressure that you need relate to the fire protection aspect of this project. If any of you guys have driven across the Midwest, you'll see that every small town, there's it seems like a lollipop sticking on the top of it. And that is to elevate that water up above. They don't have the benefit of the varying terrain in the Midwest and the flat areas. But in Vermont, we're able to take the tanks and put them at grade at a higher elevation. So when we're looking at this project and where to locate them, we tried to find a good location to provide the elevation that we needed to provide the fire protection. And what we ended up with was there's the static pressure, which is when there's no flowing water. But then when there's a fire event to produce a little over 1,200 gallons per minute, about 63 psi. And that pressure was generated from this location. And trying to fit the tanks within the site, we selected 2 tanks for redundancy, so that should they need to clean one, take one out of service, that they can do that. And looking at the size of the tanks, We didn't want to put it and perch it up on top of the ridge, so you've seen that we've stepped it down away from the high point of the site. And, we do understand that you take a 30-foot, diameter tank by 30-foot tall, it's about the size, if you think about a two-story house with a gable on top of it, you're basically looking at, 2 single-family, houses here. And we try to find a good, respectable place to fit those. And I don't think we necessarily found a place that peering through vegetation, you can't see them, but selecting a color that's green within the vegetation, I think we found an appropriate, location to provide these 2 tanks that provide drinking water and fire protection for the project.
Thank you. As I've already demonstrated, the impact is not seeing them through vegetation. You failed to meet your burden of production by producing flawed plans. So the analysis that you just provided really needs to be drawn into question. And again, I have not been given any reason to believe that you actually took an effort to rule out other locations. I wasn't contacted about this at any point. I became aware of this project seeing a VHB surveyor parked on the road, and I went and I asked them about it. There was no good faith effort by the part of the applicant to engage me in the planning process. So again, mitigating steps could have been taken. I mean, I'm not really hearing anything to indicate any narrative other than you developed a plan. The impact of 2436 Stagecoach Road was at best an afterthought. And you didn't want to change the plan. And that's my perspective, but I think I've demonstrated that your plan fails to meet the burden of production and fails to demonstrate that you took reasonable mitigating steps. There's some other things in there that I'll let you look over. But I don't know that I need to take up any more time unless you have anything else to say about the errors in your plans or the mitigating steps that you cannot demonstrate you sought to take.
Mike, I know you're out of time and I see you unmuted. We didn't have any other responses to that in the room. Is there anything you'd like to add before you step away?
No, I have nothing more to add.
Thanks, Mike. Nothing personal. Guess that's all I have. What will, typically I would hope that the full breadth of the report gets the opportunity to be discussed. Part of the discourse. Does that just happen amongst you all and then it goes into?
It'll be on the website for everybody to access. It'll be in the final.
Understood.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we take this seriously.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all for your time. You.
So now we want to shift to the balance of the industrial park for a second.
Yes, and we'll be brief.
I still had a water tank question about the aesthetics. We were on the sidewalk this morning. And standing on the site, which is below Route 100, you could see that house up near the ridge. Remember? That's right next to where those tanks would be. We're spending all this time talking about Stagecoach Road. You'll be able to see these all the way from over here, all the way to there, because they're right here at the top. Right there, okay? They're not gonna be screened. What you saw in the diagrams was somebody drew a tree and drew a tank out of scale and drew a line over the tree to the tank that was, if it was in scale, it would have been like 500 feet wide. The assistant to the commission, while that was going on, was doing Google Street View of that road. There is better evidence available. The applicant has selected poor evidence that is badly drawn, and you should consider whether you should even accept any of it as evidence.
So we'll be brief on this. So now this is the balance of the industrial park itself. I will rely on some previous testimony from the aesthetics expert as to the existing character of the area. And that is the combination of the existing state airport, some of the existing commercial and industrial uses nearby on the east side of Route 100. Also the existing industrial uses consisting of existing rock quarries that are in the area. In addition, not aesthetics is not just the existing condition, but it's also character of the area. It's important to recognize that we're also talking about the intended use and the use of the land as envisioned in the town zoning bylaw, which is industrial. And so for the industrial park itself, we feel that it does meet that standard. The project did receive local approval, which reviewed landscaping and lighting. The local approval has been submitted as evidence. The landscaping plans have been submitted as evidence. There are a series of plantings that Mike referred to that are planted around the perimeter of the industrial zone that will all go in before any construction of any buildings would occur. And so with those screening elements that are proposed and with the fact that the area is zoned industrial now, we feel it meets criteria with respect to aesthetics of the park itself within this district. With regard to some of the future buildings that are proposed as part of the park, I will refer to Council Mahoney, who developed some of the covenants. So a series of covenants that the applicant has developed in order to help guide some of the development that will happen within the park as interested businesses may come online and be interested in building. But Mahoney can describe those covenants.
Thank you. Afternoon, folks. With regards to the covenants, there were a couple of voting. We've asked for approval under all the criteria to allow future development. People coming in, buying a lot, know that what they have to deal with is development of that lot, but they have to deal with it fully. Covenants provide, and this is a mechanism that has been used in Morrisville, Vermont, or Morrisville before. Up by Copley Hospital, Reeves Farm Development, they got their underlying approval so that when the prospective lot owner came in, they knew they had to satisfy Act 250 with regards to the building and the site improvements, but didn't have to worry about the underlying criteria associated with the development. So that's a mechanism that lets a commercial owner have a comfort factor that they're not taking on the entirety of Act 250. And along the lines and to allow the commission to feel comfortable that the underlying conditions will be met, any condition which this commission applies to this development will be a requirement. It is a requirement under the covenants. Things like EV stations are contemplated. If that's going to be a requirement with regards to your lots, that's something that's going to have to be done under the covenants. Just a little bit broader, because of this mechanism, folks in this room are going to get 26 bites at the apple if there's 26 lots at the end of the day. While there has not been an objection to any number of claims of bad faith on behalf of the owner, it is objectionable from our perspective. And the thought that when each lot has to come back in front of the town and the district commission, that that ownership would play games with regards to noise requirements and things like that. I would suggest that they've done nothing to this point that would indicate that. We understand this is an emotional thing, but I think it's fair to say that the ownership has tried hard to act in good faith here. And so if we put a condition on this, it's part of the covenants. If it's not enforced, that's going to come up, one would assume, in connection with the development of the lots, as it should. If ownership plays games with noise requirements, that it's going to come up in connection with the development of the lots, as it should. I think you can be assured of that.
Anything else on?
Okay,
I didn't quite understand that. Can I ask a question?
sure. Now, Open the question from the party.
I'm sorry, just as a layperson, I truly didn't really understand what you're saying. Are you saying that, are you proposing that you would establish a covenant for the entire industrial park and therefore no buildings would have to come before Act 2 review?
No, they all do.
They all would?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I misunderstood you.
And yeah, just to clarify, the plan would be, this going to be, this industrial park area would just be subdivided lots. That's as far as we would approve in this permit.
Got it.
Then there would be, so they come forward for a shovel permit, as we call it. for each.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Sorry, they're just, at this stage of the permitting process, they're only asking for the full build out of the industrial park to be subdivided lots, the number 26. But then folks would then come in to buy that lot to develop their own individual commercial space, as I understand.
That's correct.
That's the long-term,
This is for the lots, the infrastructure, the water system, the rocket strategy.
right,
As folks come in for an individual lot, they want to build their business here, they would file an amendment to Act 250 that would encompass the building type and aesthetics, energy efficiency, certain limited criteria.
right. They'll all be under the same conditions, basically incorporated by way of covenants on this entire subdivision, but they all play by the same rules. Yeah,
Is there any planned collaboration with Amazon as a result of this industrial park? Because I've heard that Amazon has wanted to get its hands in the Morrisville Airport for a long time. And there's some landowners that have refused to sell. Is this any relationship there? I don't know if there's non-disclosure agreements. I don't know if there's a relationship at all. Just a question.
so Peter.
I don't think we have any comment on that. I can tell you, we as a firm, VHB have cited certain facilities in other states and other areas that require certain criteria. And usually, I would say, my understanding of it generally is that something like Amazon wants a bigger road than you want.
Over, yeah. Any other questions on the aesthetics of the industrial park build out and the proposed lots?
I got one more.
Okay,
Thanks for letting.
I'm sorry, your name again?
My name is James. I live on Tamarackville Road.
James.
James Tisdale. I am not a neighbor, party affiliated neighboring facility, but I do feel, and the reason that I'm here is that this massive change is drastic and offensive. I forget the terminology that was used specifically relating to, and the argument was that, well, these people are neighbors and so their opinion doesn't count. I'm not a neighbor. I was born in Copley Hospital. I've lived in this town for most of my life. I spent a little bit of time out west. And I do feel that this is a drastic change that is not positive for our community.
Thank you. Now I think we'll next jump into criterion 1A for air.
Can we take a moment, please, we need a minute to.
We have to do three.
You were sort of one number, same difference. It's adjusting the last name.
Can we just have 1 minute to confirm, talk about that process?
Sure.
Am I correct that we're moving, if we move to any other criteria at this point, we are, 90 is over, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Well,
so-
no, it's not really, because again, it's really, it's part of the game for 1 and 3, right?
Okay.
Yeah. All those sub impacts under those criteria all fall under 9E, so that's why you have those impacts, they're automatically.
I understand, I just, because it's an unusual thing to have both of these clumped together, we just want to make sure that we're not missing anything that we had planned to bring forward. So if you just have 2 seconds to check.
Yeah, because you just be talking about air and neighboring wells next from the blasting. and
Right,
rock removal.
I understand that.
That's what we're focusing on too, on the.
Yeah.
Does parking come in under aesthetics or is that under traffic?
Can I go back? Quick question? I'm sorry to go back to the last thing.
Okay, we're still pretty much on blasting, but go ahead.
Great. You can come up if you want, you can come up and say your name and where you live, if you want. Or I can point me out, yeah, thank you.
So, Foundation Rockwood, I live on the corner of Cochran Road and Brittany Lane. So I hear that there's only gonna be 3 blasting days a year. So how much blasting goes on in each day? You know, how much, how many times, how much, how big?
Do we have? We do have Pat from Main Building and Blasting here, and so I would call on him to address that question. Sure, sorry. And correct me if I'm wrong, but just the question was the duration of the blast, how long the actual blast event lasts? And each of those, we 3 blast days per year, so each event, what is that? How long is that?
Well, site specific is gonna be the size of the blast, where place to start. And where it's gonna be based on what the contractor needs and to make it, everything, production is good and everything. As far as the duration of the blast itself, from the detonation to the end,
Well, just like how many blasts per day? Because if there's only 3 blasts a year, they're gonna be big blasts. Because, and there might be a lot because you have to produce enough rock to work with. So, I can imagine it.
it'll be based on
A lot
the
more
quantities,
than
what
one a
the
day.
quantities are gonna be. But the blast size, we based on, like I said, site specific, how we're gonna get on it. We will take as much as we can, but the blast will be built to the nearest structure. We will do what we call estimated vibration. And we do a small opening blast to the seismograph they're set up. And then we will increase the blast size and monitor every blast. And make sure that, it's not really the size of the blast, it's the amount of explosives going off at one time.
Right.
Okay, per delay.
Yeah.
So you could shoot 5,000 pounds and have no more vibration than 20,000 pounds because your hole size and the amount of explosives going off is the same. Okay.
So you're drilling holes.
We're drilling
Doing
holes and
small
drilling.
blasts and then doing bigger blasts?
Yes, we'll increase it, but as we increase it, we're reading the vibrations and making sure that we stay within, our Z curve, which is the amount of vibration up to the nearest structure. And then if anybody else has any concerns, we move seismographs around, so if you feel like feeling it more than you should, we set them up and we read them in different spots.
I'm Mike Moore, I live on Golf Course Road.
Yeah.
Do you guys monitor the ones at the Percy pit?
Yes,
Okay,
but just so you know, there's 2 divisions,
mhm.
construction and employee division. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
The quarry, and, well, no, that's there is the construction division or the quarry division going to handle this?
Construction division.
Thank you. So, but they do monitor it, you said?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so when they don't blow a whistle and tell anybody that they're gonna blow, and then they blow, because we've seen the trucks that they pull up to the corner, and then they blow. And I have a dog and a cat, they go nuts, and all the dishes are shaking, and the house is shaking, and I'm probably the farthest one around from that pit. What? Can you help me out here? What does he do? I mean, are they gonna do the same thing at the other site? Or do the second check policy changes?
I'll be working at this site.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be overseeing it. In construction, every blast, you get a series of whistles. Where the blaster is going to be detonated.
Okay, because I'm, like I said, I'm quite a ways from that pit. I just works out in the pit faces my house. So you can be at the, Moortown garage and barely hear the blast go off. But if you go up to my house, I'm at the higher end of 50 decibels. So I'm just curious, if these other people who don't have to deal with this on a daily basis, when they're running their rock crushers and their equipment and the dump trucks come and bang their tailgates and everything else,
I'm worried about the decibel sound. I know you have no control over that, and I don't mean to take you into that, but I just want people to understand, the amount of noise you're gonna get is gonna be huge. And the dirt and the dust, because of the explosions, because we've seen the dirt fly up, when we're sitting on the porch, it goes up, you can't see it sitting on the porch, that's how high it goes up. Sometimes, not every time. So, just concerns, because if I'm feeling that, I don't know how many else on that road feels it. I'm laying on, I will feel it when they blast down the road from me.
But, actually, could I just jump in? I just wanted to know, just for efficiency, we do, A&R does have, their 2016 blasting best management practices. Those have been incorporated into the blast plan that's been submitted as evidence. And
Right.
the project is prepared for the condition that we follow those as well.
Yeah.
So that would be the approach that we would take to address some of the concerns that we're hearing here. In addition, I'm transitioning a little bit into 1A on dust.
Yeah, because that's where we're going next.
Along the same line, there are standard conditions that we've received from the agency. The applicant has reviewed them and agreed to abide by those standard conditions with regard to dust control for the rock extraction component of the project. And that commitment, that's documented in our response letter from last week. Just a sort of nuances, the dust itself from construction of the project and establishing the roads into the rock extraction area is also covered under the individual construction stormwater permit that's been issued by DEC, which also has dust control measures incorporated into it. So just with regard to these concerns that you propose to abide by the BMPs and the materials that are submitted.
Yeah. Okay. If you want to give any more detail on that before we turn to A&R to kind of chime in on.
No, that's.
Asking question, if I can, while, no.
No, we're on 1A now. We're on 1A.
We haven't left Brian about whether there was anything else we needed.
All right, I thought you guys were all set up.
Well, people were talking, so we didn't.
So, one of the, I don't know, did you make the blasting plan? In the plan, it said there would be 40 holes. When it says here that you're gonna do, both phases, 1 and 2 shot in the same lift, does that mean that you're doing 80 holes?
No, phase 1 and 2 is the elevation, so you would go full depth.
What,
To 40 holes, it could be anywhere from the holes, however shaped the land is.
Yeah.
You might start at shallow holes and as you go up, they get deeper.
so the bottom is the same height?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the deepest one? You don't know that, or you're gonna find out when you start drilling?
Yeah, according to the elevation that we got, they're gonna be around, very tip of it might be around 40 feet.
40 feet. For each hole.
No, at the highest point.
So how, I'm trying to understand how deep your drill hole is.
The drill holes are all different deep to go into the contour of the property.
What's the deepest one when you do one of the blasts?
You get whatever the top is, I don't know what the very high.
Yeah, I think it was, what we see is on the grading plans we submitted for blast area, that bottom reclaimed elevation that represents that level area that will be the eventual condition of the rock area. The depth, that's the depth that we're trying to achieve. And then the depth of the hole would depend on what the ground contour is.
So you're not gonna do it in multiple lifts coming down, you're gonna just go front to
Typically,
back.
my understanding, and this is that they work at face of it instead of working down. It doesn't come off in layers as much as it comes off in a sort of horizontal way that we like, that they work on a face and take the face down versus going down vertically. Is that correct?
Yes.
I got 2 questions for you. Drilling down that deep, how big are the chunks gonna be? And how long would it take you to drill those 40 holes based on the different heights of it?
The size of the rock is what that's why we do an opening blast and we adjust our pattern from the opening blast. We try to give the customer the best product he can have without having too much price.
Yeah.
As far as drilling, how long?
To get that
There's
one
a whole bunch of different depth holes. You can't really put a number on it.
Yeah, I know, but
The drill can drill maybe 600 to 700 lineal feet a day. So, you know, if you got 40 holes,
you're gonna be there
20 holes.
3 days maybe drilling? Estimated 3 days maybe drilling before you blast?
Yeah, depends on the shop size. Yeah, and the terrain, I mean, that's not flat, so the drill's gotta go up there and track around.
Of course, I understand that. I've been around that, so I don't know. But then the one question I was asking about the size of the rock is because I've been over to the Percy pit, they blast, but then they get in there with the rock pecker. And then there's days of that going on. So that's why I was trying to understand how fine you were trying to blast that rock. So maybe we didn't have to hear that, you know, if this all goes through, we don't have to hear that rock pecker going on for days.
So we try to get it as small as we can, and still be economical.
But there's no guarantees that there might not have to come in with a rock pecker and peck it.
Because the top of your blast, you don't load the explosive right to the top.
Yeah, I
You hold it
know.
down, so you got bigger stuff on top, but that's just the nature of the business.
So the likelihood of having a rock pecker come in is pretty good.
I don't know, they make a lot of places we work, they use oversized rock for landscaping, for, you know, for retaining walls.
My understanding is that they were gonna have it so it would be used as crushed stone for
Yeah,
drainage.
the meat of the shop, a lot of times what you can, they'll use for, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna design, but they
So that-
can be
that
used
could
for
be a-
retaining walls or landscaping.
Okay. So the possibility of a rock pecker could be very good. Could be. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
And so only, I think I had read that only people within like 500 feet of the blasting would be notified of when the blasting was gonna occur. So like, who would that be? I mean, how many people are that close?
I can't speak that level of detail right now. The approach to the notifications in the blasting plan has been.
So I'm sorry if I'm prolonging, but I just feel like I haven't had a chance to speak to any of this, so, so 55 decibels is a coffee percolator or sewing machine or a conversation we're having right now. And to me, this is gonna be a lot louder than that, no matter how close or far you are. Whatever the applicant has been doing in the field already, like Mr. Warren said, just the dump truck noise, the slamming of that is jarring and very noticeable. So that constant construction, is going to interfere with everybody's life. My husband, grew up near a quarry, and he said it was enough to drive you mad. When you're outside, the noise, when you're inside, the noise is there. Your house shakes constantly, you just can't get away from it. We have always enjoyed in the summertime when the corn gets just high enough that it blocks some of the traffic noise from Route 100. There's not gonna be as thoughtful as you may think you have been in planning all of this. There's nothing that's gonna be able to block the noise of the blasting and the crushing and the loading and the dumping and the engines and the traffic and the construction and the people. There will be no getting away from it for 10 or more years. Even if I tried to get away from it, I don't think I could, because who's gonna buy my house? It's gonna be worth nothing, and nobody wants that construction project in their front yard for 10 or more years. The scale of this project is just mind-blowing to me. I don't see, it's just beyond any demand or need I can see that our community has. That couldn't be met in a smaller project in the zone or an area that's already built up for development. it's gonna ruin everything about our home. My quality of life, it has the potential to affect our air, water quality, the potential to damage our homes and our water and our septic system. We won't see fields and trees and mountains anymore, only constant traffic, construction, and building. I've been at my house for 20 years. And it was not industrial when I bought my house. And I have no say in making it industrial. And it was along the green corridor. And
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
So I do want to first call on Ms. Mojo with A&R just to chime in on the applicants for Criterion 1 air for dust and air pollution control from the blasting operation. How A&R has chimed in on that.